notify everybody right now. Oh, and then my camera is like super laggy on this. I'll just turn it off. There's no reason for it to be like insanely laggy. Um, Okay, Juan. Uh,
No, we are not ready.
yeah, yeah. Of course, right when I started, my camera went down and then my mic went down. Wait, my camera's up, but it's not up on the thing. Hello? Hello? Wait, that was crazy. This entire time it was fine, and then it decided not to be. And now I'm just super zoomed in. That's cool. That's that's crazy.
Bro, it knows.
Yeah.
It's like
Um, but I think the audio, unless my computer is just like insanely backed up right now, but uh for everyone who can hear the audio and it doesn't bother you, I apologize for the technical difficulties. It has been 7 months since I've done a one-on-one voice of all things collab. We did a few group streams in the past, but yeah, this is something that I had been kind of not avoiding, but I had a lot of theories that still are cooking, still have not released them. Like for example, Joyboy, I don't know if you saw that had like a Nami thumbnail. It's pretty noticeable on my thing, but it's from like January. That video was scripted a year prior, so it was like completely done. I just didn't, end up posting it or like getting into the editing until much later. Um, but yeah, so with that, well, first I should introduce my guest, which is Joyboy Theories. If you guys don't know, he's been cooking up a storm recently. I don't know if that has to do with the break week or break month, or but I've been seeing popping off on Twitter too, saying like, "Yo, watch out for this theory." And I've been on the edge of my seat with like a bunch of your theories. So, thank you for coming in. And how you doing, Joyboy?
Yeah, I'm doing good. We've been cooking, dude. I don't know. Basically, from the moment that I got an editor, making content has been way easier. For I've been doing YouTube for a long time, but for the majority of the time, it's just been me by myself, and the editing was the worst part of that. So I had a bunch of ideas. I feel like sometimes I'm an idea machine when I'm in the zone, but actually, like editing the videos, man, grueling.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have an editor now, so basically, I can just like go off. And I feel like we've been doing that for the past couple of weeks, and I plan to keep doing that, honestly.
Yo, that's awesome to hear because I'm in the process of getting like an editor for my full videos, and I've very much the same way. I have so many I mean, literally kind of exactly this same
Oh,
story
I
where
know.
I literally like half of my scripts are from, no, I wouldn't even say half. I think most of my scripts right now are from 2022, and they're still relevant, which is even crazy. Or half of them are from at the first half of 2023, so that means that we're about to pass the year mark on some of them, and they're still relevant. Like I have a Holy Knights video that like Sai, for example, he loves that theory, but it's just, and now I can update it. To be honest, there's some things that I can add to it because of recent information, but they're all still relevant, and I'm just like slowly trucking along with. And then you know what makes it worse though is that the new every chapter is just insane, and it adds so much new stuff to it, whereas like back in Onigashima at the end of Wano, it was like you could choose to not like dive deep into the most recent chapter, and you can like hold on to the previous chapter. Oh, Shanks showed up, blah blah blah, and you talk about Shanks, and then it's like then Cross Guild shows up, and then you could do that. But the more we got into Egghead, the harder it became to like not be like wired in onto the newest information. And that's what makes it super hard, because like my most recent videos, they're all like new scripts, but like I think the dragon video before the one that you had watched, that one was an older script, and then the dragon is blind theory, that one was like a new script that I recently wrote. So Man, getting an
But since
editor.
it's a yeah, well, it's insane to me that you actually write the scripts ahead of time. I don't do that, but if I did do that, there would be like I would have to upload the video right then and there, just out of excitement for having written a script. It's crazy that you sit on them for so long.
Yeah, see, for me, it's the editing is the bottleneck, like you. But I recently fell on like my new editing style. I really like it. I'm gonna upgrade that current style, and I think I talked to you about how like the copyright stuff was super annoying and blah blah. Um but now it's a lot easier with my new editing style that I could pump out videos much faster. So like after this call, I'll be working on that Jimmy Neutron theory. Um, but that was actually this is actually funny that we ended up on this conversation because for people who are new to this kind of stream, which is pretty likely given that it's been 7 months since I had it. This is the voice of all things, and so there's a few traditions that I'm kind of forgetting, but they're coming back to me. The point of this stream, the voice of all
Bro.
things, is to tap into the voices in the community and in One Piece, because I feel like the best way to see what's going to happen next is to really hone in on the community. There's so many times where Oda just demonstrates that, like as a writer, he really knows what things that we like and what things we talk about. An example is the last chapter where it's like the meme of painting a sword black, and then now he has Luffy painting his bat. And you know, I found out, I don't know if you knew this, Joyboy, but apparently, well, this isn't like a he didn't come out and say it, but um a possible big reason is because the Red Sox were celebrating the 25th anniversary of the anime airing on the same day as the chapter release. So that's why, because the MLB was announcing that, people think that Oda made the baseball reference in line with that like giant collab. So there's also that side too, where Oda's like super cracked in his ability to make something like it's like PR, but it's also really, if it's fun for the story too somehow. So it's interesting when you look at it like that. But
Yeah,
um
I mean, and that's insane. It's also really possible. I feel like Oda is just writing by the seat of his pants, kind of like you streaming, and he's just like reading the newspaper, baseball comes up, and then suddenly he has an amazing idea.
yeah, that Oda's Oda's inspirational in so many ways for that. Like I really appreciate how he's able to um I don't know, just like make everything streamlined. Like he's doing so many different concepts, and then it just fits. I don't know how it ends up working so well, but it does. Um
Insane problem solving skills.
yeah. And so with the voice of all things, we kind of, you know, it helps to learn a little bit about who we're talking to, where their voice came from, like as far as how they got into the One Piece community, how they got into One Piece. And I was gonna also ask you how you do your scripts, like because I found that interesting, but we talk about that after. um if you want to let the viewers know how you got into One Piece, and just making content for One Piece too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can start off with that point. First off, I do not script. Never have. Did for maybe 1 year. But it doesn't work for me.
Mm-hmm.
This is an interesting conversation in and of itself, and not really related to how I got onto YouTube. But I liked YouTube as it was in the past, more so with like dudes in basements. Nowadays it is so much more professional. It's a lot of people will tell you, especially when I first created my channel, it wasn't that great, but that didn't matter to me. I wanted to not necessarily be like a leader in the community, but just be with the community, just be somebody that somebody could feel like that they could talk to and interact with, and I wanted my videos to have that same vibe to them. So I treated it as if I was just talking to somebody, and that was a conscious decision on my part, and that's just kind of how we rolled with it. Writing a script, ultimately, even if I end up writing a script, I re-record it. anyway, in my natural speaking voice, using my normal cadences, or the eccentricities of my speech itself, wordiness and all, extra words and all. So that's just how I always enjoyed YouTube. It's kind of changed now, and I've been forced to adapt a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, in my more recent videos, I try to like intentionally speak a little bit faster so that we can get through content, because there's just, the truth is that like a lot of people, uh, there's just so much entertainment out there. There's so much content, and obviously they can press the times two as well
Yeah.
on the YouTube, but and cut out spaces as well, because I don't really speak naturally as like a host. There's a lot of pauses. There's a lot of just like I just did, and stuff. So it cut those things out, and it creates just an entirely different vibe. I feel like for my new videos, um, than what they were in the past. But yeah, I mean, I started off as part of the One Piece community a really long time ago. Um, it was I've just
Wait, hold on. I think it cut out. Oop, might have lost.
been being a One Piece fan. Example, Harry Potter.
Oh, and
Oh,
it
did I
cut
cut
off.
out?
Yeah, it cut out for like the last two sentences.
uh yeah, anyways, long story short is I've been in the community for a long time, and theories is pretty much the thing that drew me to One Piece first,
Mm-hmm.
I would say. It's One Piece, the way that it's written, how Oda is able to foreshadow things, it just invites discussion in a way that I enjoy a lot. And that's the reason why One Piece is the only manga thing that's really brought me into the community, as far as message board stuff in the
Mm-hmm.
past. And I just haven't left. I'm still here.
Yeah. It's in I think I probably mentioned this the first time we collabed, because we or at least one on one, I was doing a new thing on my channel where I was posting it as a video, which I might bring back honestly, but as far as like live streams goes, this is our first connection, one on one. And when I started out, a lot of people were saying like, "Dang, like Par, you're just like Joyboy theories," and I think I mentioned that the first time. And watching your last few videos, um, because I've seen some of your videos before, but then the last few videos, really, I was like, "Wow, this is actually really," especially because you went on like hard tangents, and I feel like the not a lot of videos that I see do that, where they are willing to let the viewers go on the hard tangents with them, which is what I generally like to do, because that's my genuine thought process. Is like, I'll be thinking this one line of logic, and then another one pops up, and it's useful for the end conclusion, but for someone who's just listening, it is a complete like switch of topic. And so, as an example, for people, Joyboy's last video, which we'll talk more about towards the middle, I just wanted to reference it. It was like we were talking about, um I think we were talking about like the structure of the world and the planets and stuff like that, and then you switch to the power of love with Sanji, and and then you talked about that for a while, and then you bring it back together, and that's just like it's awesome to hear that you don't script it, and you just been talking into the mic, and you just cut out the like the likes and the knows and that kind of thing. That's it?
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of like a first draft. It's kind of like you're writing out loud
Yeah.
is basically the concept for it. It's like I have the thoughts in my brain. The information is there.
Yeah.
And I just kind of string it along in a way that makes logical sense to me. But there's a lot of rabbit holes that I go down that doesn't actually lead anywhere as productive as maybe it should be. And sometimes I do cut those things out, but with like the Sanji thing in particular, like in retrospect, I know um, that does not lend towards engagement.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. But I found that it's interesting, and at the end of the day, content should reflect you.
Mhm.
So my baseline is like, if I find this to be interesting, I'm keeping it
Right.
most of the time. And if people don't like it, that's just it. It is what it is. But that's a whole conversation in and of itself. And I like the min maxing process of keeping people engaged and watching your videos. I mean, it's important. Obviously, it's part of our job to an extent,
Yeah.
but I do think about these kinds of things. But the way that I structure my videos, and this also relates to my book as well, it's both a positive and a negative. And I think anybody who watches my videos knows, like, I usually do not spoil where exactly I'm going at the beginning of the video.
Yeah.
So essentially, there's like this trust process of anybody who's familiar with me is trusting that when they begin the video that it's going to end up being something that they like. But it takes a while to get there. And this also, it's like a double-edged sword in a sense of like people are like, what is the point of all this information, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's not until you get for like that video was 44 minutes. It's not until you get maybe like 25, 28 minutes in the video that you're like, oh, okay, I'm starting to get the point of what all that information prior is. And even sometimes like people just forget, right? Like it's been a couple minutes since I've said something else before. So
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes I think it feels like you could rewatch my video and get more from it.
Yeah.
And to better like analyze like, okay, what is the organization of this?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. That so uh interestingly, for the way I script my videos, I write them all in one go, and it's all from memory. So like the references, everything, they're all, because that's something that I really want to have for my videos, is the hard references, so that like and it's so funny too, because then there'll be comments like blah blah, this didn't happen, but it's like I have the direct reference, the line by line, all the translations there. And I'll do also, when I script it, I go from memory, and then when I go to record it, and then the editing process, that's when I'm recording it, that's when I'll fact check. Like I'll be like, okay, was this the right chapter number, was this the right thing? And so that's why I end up scripting it. It's mainly so I can have that part. But it's like, if I some of my videos, I've been debating whether I can like forego like that really critical like bottleneck of having, because I know the information's right, and like I know that, but to have, because I put up all the panels onto the screen, and I know that other people don't do that. And it's also like a double-edged sword, because it's also like a problem if you use the panels too, like if you put the entire, like if I went like chapter and put every single panel, then obviously that's an issue, right? But I don't do that, and there's a whole different discussion on that front. But that's why I have to script it, because it's like, because I'm so hard stuck in doing it that way. But and people actually like, some people I know like listen to audio only, but which, by the way, I just want to point out for people who probably already recognize by now, but we give a lot of credit to Vinland, to Ragnar, for having like an insane like ASMR deep voice. But Joyboy's voice is like on that level. Like, wait, do you, for
Nah,
your book The Booms, are you the audiobook voice? Do you read it, or do
no, no. So it's tough, dude. Like, I've gotten this since I started my YouTube channel that I have a pleasant voice to listen to, and so intentionally, it's like let's talk like this sometimes, just
yeah,
to
yeah,
get
yeah.
to change the pace a little bit. But I can't do the freaking character voices. Like my voice is my voice. I can't do it consistently, so I can't be the audiobook reader, unfortunately.
Mm.
But I get that comment a ton. Like you should read this, and then I start doing it. And it's like, no, this is not good. Try me trying to do women's voices is no, it's
Yeah, yeah.
bad idea.
Yeah, it's, yeah. I was just like, I was listening. I was like, because I told you I was with my son. I was putting him to sleep, and it was weird because I was like, oh man, I'm gonna fall asleep to this voice. But I was weird. Like it was like I was engaged all the way through, and I'm like, how did this happen? This is a 40-minute video. How did I stay awake through all of it? Not that like the video was boring, but that was the craziest part, because I was like this close to falling asleep because my son was falling asleep, and I just stayed awake, and I ended up watching two of the videos, so a total of 90 minutes about of your voice, and it was just really engaging. I just wanted to point that out. It was just
Yeah,
like, um
it's part of the art, dude. It's literally part of the art.
did you feel
Things that
like
go
you
into content.
had that voice at the start of your channel, or because I actually don't, like as far as like your
Well,
oldest videos, the progression
yeah.
of your
Oh
content.
man, that is an embarrassing story. So it depends on how I choose to speak.
Yeah.
I'm naturally incredibly soft spoken, and this was especially true before I started One Piece. So I would talk more like this, and this is how I would present the theory to you. And it's like a noise that's coming from the very front of my voice
Uh-huh.
rather than from the back like this, where it starts to get a little bit, it's different. But there was a point I was really self conscious about my voice as a YouTuber when I first started. It's just I don't think that a lot of people understand that putting your presence out there on the internet for the first time is a weird experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I definitely had some insecurities about that. So there was a period in my YouTube past, the Void Century past, where we really talk like this in order to make sure that we sound like a YouTuber.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, oh man. So I have like eras of what my voice sounds like on YouTube, and that's a thing.
Dang. Well, next time I'll have that prepared. I'll have the history of Joyboy Theories channel
No, no,
prepared.
no, no.
That'll be a good
I will
one.
erase you.
You'll erase. I did that with Brago, low key. I brought up. I forgot how I did it, but I just found like a theory video that he made like years ago, and I forget what that was significant. He said like that was like his first theory, and it ended up being true. He predicted that Kaido's uh commanders would be like not the calamities, but like from the Bible, like the calamities essentially, and so like that there would be the plague and whatever. And this was just off the introduction of Jack, and so it was or. Yeah, I think it was just off the introduction of Jack. He got like the plague and whatever. Obviously, he didn't get the visuals right, but I forget the full nuance of that. But sometimes it's fun to bring up the past. I mean, I wouldn't do it for myself because every time people bring up my old videos and then I forget that they're my old videos and then I listen to them and I immediately close out. I'm just like, yeah, it's okay. We don't need to listen to this,
Bro,
guys.
I, I linked in my last one that was from 2017, and it feels bad because on one hand I want a reference of like, look, I'm
Hmm.
saying this and I don't want to do the whole theory, so here's the old video that I
Yeah.
made. Then I actually watched the old. Maybe we shouldn't.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I've done that recently too, especially because my editing was so bad before that, like, when I pull someone from a current video, which the editing, debatably isn't better for some people, but comparatively to my old videos, I think that's way worse. And it's like, oh, okay, I don't want to show you guys these videos. It's fine. Like, this actually happened with you because you asked me to send you like any video I think is related, and there's one that I think is related to the chapters, which is like my first Zoro video, and I basically say that in that video I say that we're gonna get it later down the line. So this is like 3 years ago. I said that we're gonna get characters that are naturally become like have Zoan devil fruits naturally. There's not gonna be like a devil fruit in between. They're just gonna manifest these powers, and um Zoro would be one of them, one of those characters, which that theory evolved into a different way. But then it was talking about like spiritual cutting and like how Zoro cut Ryuma without cutting him, but it lit on like fire, but it wasn't a normal fire, and just a bunch of stuff. And maybe that relates to how we're able to damage the Gorosei. But all that aside, I do want to get into like more of the current videos now that we heard a little bit about you, and just like a little bit about the way you think. I think that's always important to like, when we uh talk and theorize to understand like where someone's coming from and where they're trying to go with the idea too. But before I do that, let me read some of these super chats, and I'll just let everybody know that we'll be reading all the super chats at the end of the stream. Probably go for like 2-ish hours. I honestly, that might be lowballing a conversation between me and Joyboy, but uh, but however
Fake news.
however long you can stay doesn't matter, Joyboy. Just let me know, and then we'll touch on some super chats at the end, and I'll get to some super chats now. And I apologize again for the like lack of organization. It has been 7 months, but bear with me, guys. We'll make this better soon enough. um and I want to thank everybody who's in the chat, a lot of mods, and Geo's in the chat. I saw a few other people that are not new names for my streams at least. So appreciate everybody who's coming through. Thank you 3 Day. Thank you Axe. Um, and then my frequent my viewers who always like to poke the bear, always like to make fun of me. But real quick, we got Vex joining as a visionary. Appreciate you, and gifted 5 visionary memberships. Awesome. I'll
Shout
probably
out to Vex.
shout outs to Vex. Yeah, I'll probably get um in like a week and a half some members content, like more coming that way, because like I was telling Joyboy, um I have so many videos backlogged that all I have to do is kind of record it, and what I do for my members is I just post the audio, and then in during the time that I edit, then it goes public afterwards. So members get my audio theories. There's still one theory that I don't know why I just haven't edited, but it has to do with Logia Awakenings and Kuzan, and it was from October 2022. And had I edited it, it would have made so much sense with the Garp fight. But then after the Garp fight happened, then I was like, I don't want to edit anymore. It's fine. That's kind of why I sit on the videos, is because after I make the video and after I put the thoughts down, it is a weird thing. And this is why, like, I kind of like, um, especially like my wife or friends, I'm like, I'm not really a content creator, because for me it's like I got the idea out and I wrote it all down, and then like all my motivations, like, I got the idea out and I shared it with like 1 or 2 people, and I don't really like putting it out there is just that extra step that I have to do because I'm a content creator. But naturally the way I am is if I
We are
watch a
so
movie,
different.
when I watch a movie, I'll call like my best friend and I'll tell them the idea. And then if other people ask, then I tell them the idea. And that's kind of how it works. It comes up in conversation, but the content creating part is the second, the next step for me. So it's a little hard. But you were saying it's opposite? Why is it opposite?
Bro, as soon as I have a thought, everybody needs to know this. This is groundbreaking.
No, I'm like that too. It's just like as soon as I tell, like, if I tell my wife my theory, well, for example, in the dragon is blind theory, I did tell my wife that theory, and she ended up helping a little bit with the like some visual art stuff, the details there. But in general, if like, and I guess it helps that none of my like best friends watch One Piece, so that I don't end up like just telling them the theory and then just not having a YouTube channel. But I do like sharing it. I'm being on Twitter also helps, because it's like I see so many people like posting ideas. I'm like, oh man, I made this video like 2 years ago, and I'm like this close to linking it, but it's like it's fine. Go have this conversation. I don't need to be a part of it.
That reminds me though, like there's one time where I actually did make a video, not just the audio. I made an entire video and I uploaded it to YouTube, and I was just sitting on it and I was thinking about it. Do I actually like this or not?
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't really decide. And I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I basically forgot about it. Like time passed and it was just sitting there unlisted on my
Yeah.
YouTube. And so one time, couple years later, I was just playing with buttons on YouTube, figuring out what exactly they do. And I accidentally publiced all of my unlisted videos simultaneously. So this video that was made 3 or 4 years in the past is suddenly uploaded for the first time,
And how'd it go? Did
along with a lot
people
of other stuff.
Were people confused,
I,
or
I, yeah, I reacted so fast, man. I got scared. I was like, no. There was
no,
also
look at
like
this.
for ads and stuff as well, because you like upload the ad to YouTube
Yeah.
first so that you show it. Like it was, yeah. Anyway, that happened. That was the only time I've ever created a video that I have not shared immediately.
Dang. Wait, what was the
I think it was
video
about.
about?
I think it was about the. I think it was about the ancient weapons, way, way, way back in the day. We're talking like 2016, 2017.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Talking about maybe what they were supposed to be leading up to Uranus.
Yeah.
Back in the day where that was not like an overly speculated thing.
Yeah. This is around the same time when Gear 5 looked like a super demon edit on on the internet.
No, even before that.
Oh yeah, 27. Yeah. It's just funny to think about that era where it's like that was kind of, it was like, after we got Super Saiyan 4 and Dragon Ball, people like made Super Saiyan 5, 6, 7 edits. That's what they did with Gear 5, and it just looked so crazy compared to what we have now. I want to see. You know what? Now I think about it, I want a video of Oda reacting to all those fan arts to see what he thought of them.
Bro.
Oh God. Um.
You know what's funny is his actual comments are clear that he despised everybody who thought Gear Fifth would be that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
he,
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, hold on. Let me read this one super chat, and then I did have a question based off something you said, which was about foreshadowing. So real quick, Lord Vegeta, thank you for being a member for 13 months, a year and 1 month. That's crazy. He said, "What's up, y'all? The voice of all things is back. 100. Like the stream. Appreciate you, Lord Vegeta. Uh, and I'll be looking at chat throughout it, guys. And then also keep in mind it's been a while since I've done a stream like this, so it's hard for me to keep up with everything, which usually I'm good with. Oh, Kev Dog. Wow, great timing. Shout out to you, Kev Dog. Um, I was gonna message you actually. I'll probably later this month to get you on a voice of all things too. And
does he actually pronounce his name as Kev Dog? Because I always in my mind was Kev Dog.
he's he has various ways. Actually, I don't know if he prefers a certain way, but he lets me say Kev Dog. I don't think he's mad at me for just calling him Kev Dog.
Kev Dog.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I met him at a convention. I just call him Kev, so it's like, you know. Actually, no, I feel like a few times I slipped up and said Kev Dog like in real life, and it wasn't the weirdest thing. He said it's open to
Bro,
interpretation, however people roll with
if
it.
ever I meet you, do not call me Joyboy, please.
Wait,
Especially
okay,
not like loudly.
okay. Wait, what is I supposed to like? Don't tell me what I'm supposed to say, but JB, is that what you want for?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, okay.
JB is good.
Okay, okay. See, I have a weird thing with JB because so this is a fun fact nobody really I don't think I've mentioned on this channel, but growing up, people always called me Justin Bieber, or like they'd call me like so this is something people know. Par is
It's the
technically
hair.
like my real name, and so they would like Par Bieber, and then they would make things like I still on my Facebook profile. There's comments of like my profile picture. They're like, "Yo, you're just like Justin Bieber," but I would get the haircut first, and I changed first, and then he copied me, and we were like, the reason why is because we have the same face structure, and but we're like we don't look alike. But growing up, like I remember all my brother's best friends were like, "Yo, your little brother looks like Justin Bieber." I'm like, "Come on!" Especially when I wear glasses. So then JB,
Now,
people would unironically in school say like JB, and so I was like, "No, don't do that." Not that I didn't like Justin Bieber. It's just like I want to be me, you know. It's my haircut.
now I feel like I'm traumatizing you. Is my presence traumatizing?
Nah. No, no, no. We're chilling. We're chilling. We're that was it's crazy because that's like it's like 15, 16 years ago kind of stuff, you know? It's so wild how much time flies, and I was still watching One Piece back then. At least I had that. Um but okay, on the foreshadow thing, you mentioned that you liked like one of the things that you gravitated to with One Piece was like Oda's ability to like foreshadow so well. And I think like you, especially as an author yourself, you have like a different understanding than probably the mass community in that word and how to use it and blah blah. But for Gear 5, what where are you on that spectrum of like Oda foreshadowing Gear 5? Was it something that he had planned at the start? Was it something that like to what capacity do you think that Gear 5, Sun God Nika, Joyboy, you know, whatever nickname, how far back do you think Oda had this like structure planned?
So, talking about um, the art of storytelling and specifically what I like about storytelling is really interesting. For instance, I just watched a show, Made in Abyss,
Oh,
and a lot of
yeah.
people really like that show. It's really controversial as well. I'm not planning on getting into that, but just from the actual way the story is told, it's similar to a lot of other things that I do not like, which is that it feels like, and I feel like the more stories you consume, the greater sense that you have for this, that the author is essentially chapter by chapter or moment by moment, kind of making it up. And you can discern that. Like there's the author had themselves a new idea, which doesn't necessarily connect well with what came before. And but Oda doesn't do that, or he does do that, but he does that in a unique way, which I really vibe with. So first off, there's no doubt that a lot of things in the story of One Piece are directly foreshadowed, meaning that Oda had this idea years ago, and is finally getting to it. But he is also a gardener, which is like a term that George R. R. Martin uses, for instance,
Hmm.
of it's like there's plotters versus gardeners. A lot of authors, they plot out their story in great detail, and so it has a sort of structure to it. But if you plot your story out too much, it you can tell it feels kind of disjointed because you learn about like the identity of your story as well as how to tell the specific moments as you go, and you need to be able to adapt per moment in order to create the best experience, I think. And so, a lot of the best stories are from people that are just going off, right? They just have a new idea. They're feeling it as it's happening in the moment. And Oda definitely does that as well. So you have this like combination of being a plotter, of having a plan, but then also being flexible as to what the story needs at a particular moment. And so, like, a common example of this is that, as far as like the structure of One Piece is concerned, at the end of every chapter, Oda leaves us with some sort of cliffhanger. And that's just part of the weekly grind of drawing a manga and making sure that people buy the next issue. But in the process of creating cliffhangers for the next chapter, Oda often introduces things, whether it's characters or ideas or whatever, that then becomes something that he needs to tie off later. So a lot of the times, these things are new ideas that add to whatever his vision was before, and then he's got to problem solve it as the arc usually continues, of like figuring out, okay, well then how does the story evolve with these new elements that I've most likely recently thought up. So with Gear Fifth, so let's take a step back. I think Oda's basically confirmed recently that he is not quite as much of a plotter as people initially gave him credit for. That's not to say that he isn't, but like for instance, I think a great example of this is hockey. There is just no way that hockey it now, specifically how it's defined in all of its facets, was a fully fleshed out idea when the even though in chapter one or whatever, Shanks used Conqueror's hockey, which we know now today, or in Skypiea, Enel, his observation hockey mantra at the time. I think that this is something that's evolved, and it's just frankly a really natural process when you're writing a story for 20 some odd years. I mean, like, and this is also, I think, something that experience teaches you is that authors can get bored as well. That is something that can actually happen. And so, if you plot too heavily, it's kind of like you wrote down the idea, now you're satisfied, right?
Hmm.
A lot of people are motivated in a way of like, constant creation. Oda has ideas today that are different from the ideas that he began with. There is no doubt. That is just normal as being a human being and having experiences. Um, and so, yeah, but as far as Gear Fifth goes, no, I do not think that Oda began with the idea of the sun god Nika, and that Luffy, devil fruit itself, the Gomu Gomu no Mi, would change. I don't think that that's true. That being said, Oda has a skill, and that skill is to be able to take everything that he has already written and be able to repurpose it in order to make connections. I think that if you're really a student of One Piece, and the logic part of your brain fires, you can find elements that Oda intended, initially when he included them, that they would become something more, and they didn't. And it's from those things that you realize that he kind of he plays with the pieces, but he does it at an absurdly high level, that people can't tell,
Right.
and that is the art of it, in my opinion. I try to as well reflect this. I feel like it's a very similar skill as to making theories. What you do and what I do is like let's just be honest, right? The majority of theories are wrong, but you and I and other connections and make it make sense based on what is there. And I think that Oda does that as well for his own story.
So, and to give people a little bit more insight, you had a video about Shanks. I feel like I didn't end up finishing it because my son ended up waking up, but a lot of it had to do with, and this was a really cool detail. I'm correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's in the Shanks video, not the moon piece video, but a detail that I didn't know was that Christmas was like, you know, it's about Jesus, but prior to that it was a celebration of the sun god that happened to also be December 25th, and then afterwards ended up being transitioned into basically a celebration for Jesus and Christmas, blah blah. But prior to that, I forgot the Latin words for it. It was you know, a celebration for the sun god, and it was religious syncretism. What was the word for that?
Religious
Religious
syncretism.
syncretism, yeah, where basically the idea is that it's almost human nature to build off of your prior beliefs and merge them with later on beliefs. That's how a lot of like humanity works, with even on the scientific end. It's you have a belief system, and you know, maybe it develops over time. It doesn't mean you throw away what's in the past, but it seems like cultures around the world always had like a draw to the sun. And if if in recent interviews, some of them like going back as far as the one with Kishimoto, he had mentioned like with Kishimoto saying that like it would be a disservice to the viewers uh if he didn't expand on new ideas that he had, because that's what the readers and like truly want. But it's like a balancing act of like what he had originally and what he has coming in that's new, and it's kind of like merging it, like you said, like week to week he has to like figure out how to make the lines connect. But he's also has said that like Gear 5, he said this with the author of Detective Conan, this is right after Gear 5's reveal. He had said, when asked what was the most anticipated part of his story, or like had One Piece gotten to that point, and his answer was yes, Gear 5 was his most anticipated thing, because he wanted this power to be a tribute to all these lost arts in manga, in animation, whatever. That's why we're getting like the Tom and Jerry stuff, the eye popping out. He was saying that that was very common in his childhood and prior, but it slowly got phased out as like, you know, the entertainment industry, you know, started becoming more modernized, I guess. And so like he said like many times that Gear 5 has been like this thing that he's been building up to. And where I'm kind of as like, I don't know, like Gear 5 is like an easy thing, because if you had Gear 1, Gear 2, Gear 3, next thing you do is Gear 5, right? But the name Sun God Nika is something that may not have been per se like at the very start, right? Like the name Nika itself, Oda gave the fruit originally the name Gomu, but then we create theories like the Shanks video where you're saying you know, along the lines of something that he got rid of his part of the destiny for Luffy, right? And it makes you wonder a little bit, like, did Oda have that plan at the start? Like, he had Luffy play this role from the very beginning. Do you think that like the end point of it wasn't figured out? Because that's where I'm kind of confused, where it's like if he had Shanks give up this important devil fruit and he ended up tying with Roger, and that's something he actually reiterated, he didn't like change it in the Onigashima, he doubled down on like Shanks's role and made it even more apparent that like right in line with us figuring out that it's not the Gomu, it's actually the Nika. We find out that Shanks was like going after the ship. We find out that he's a Figarland and all these things. So like when Oda does things like that, it makes me feel like maybe Oda did have Joyboy figured out from the very beginning. It's just that like maybe the names weren't there. I feel like maybe Joyboy might have been the original name and Nika came later. So how does, especially in line with your Shanks video, if you want to explain some of your Shanks videos for the viewers, and like this part about how early Oda could have foreshadowed something like this. I feel like that's really important, because if I feel like if Luffy and Gear 5 and Joyboy are probably the most important things in the story, and you kind of get a benchmark of how he foreshadowed that, you kind of get an understanding of, okay, this is what he's doing with the moon. This is what he's doing with Emu. This is what he's doing with the Gorosei, right? Like you get a small litmus test. So how do you feel about chapter 1, Shanks, Luffy, Nika, Gom, like that stuff in line with your Shanks video.
Yeah, so I mean, this is one of the great things about this is most likely these will end up or stay as questions. We'll never know, unless Oda chooses to reveal it, which he might. Who knows? And even if this is like generally true, in what ways is it true? Is also a question. Until Oda actually reveals what his plans were from the start, like all we can do is speculate. But just for like the general concept of it, my belief is that, like, for instance, Joyboy. Joyboy wasn't introduced, the name itself, until Fishman Island. So there's like this question of well, Oda could have had the idea, but when did he have the idea? Could it have been somewhere in the middle of the story? And then once he has the idea, then he starts to flesh it out, and then he finds the places to sort of foreshadow it. So it has been foreshadowed for an absurdly long time, and he has been anticipating it for literal years, but maybe not from the actual beginning of the story. Again, he's so good at this. I can just tell you from personal experience that this is actually an accomplishable feat of being able to take what you start off with, as especially at the very beginning of One Piece. I think that a lot of things were not defined, and what you have to bear in mind is that for a lot of manga artists, uh, continuing publishing weekly is not a guaranteed thing.
Mm-hmm.
They are praying and they are hoping that they stay serialized, and it's not until something really catches on that it's like, okay, now you can plan beyond what is the next immediate arc. So yeah, with I don't know if I can actually like explain this with words. And if you disagree with me, or if other people disagree with me, that's fine as well. It doesn't matter to me, honestly. At the end of the day, what we got is fire,
Mm-hmm.
and it works. So it doesn't matter. But like the way that I see it is that Oda started off the idea of One Piece as a hero's journey. That's what One Piece is. It's a hero's journey. He was going to create a hero that was a pirate, kind of. It's almost like a funny little idea of like, what are the heroes of the world? And it's basically a character who rejects being a hero, but is in fact a hero. Will play out in that way. And if you read A Man of a Thousand Faces, or whatever, the book that was basically defined what the hero's journey is from all the mythologies of all of humanity, One Piece follows that to an absurd degree. From even like the names of the chapters or the titles of the stages in the book, like entering the belly of the whale. It's like Oda read that and was like, let's make that happen. Um, so yeah. But as far as and I think all these concepts are really related. It's kind of hard to word it in the moment, but religious syncretism is just a natural thing to occur. Like, the reality is that your beliefs about the world are largely derivative of what your parents believe. This is probably less true now than it was in the past, but in the past, this was like 100%
Mm-hmm.
what happened for everybody. They were small little microcosms of the world, which were relatively um, uh, distinct from each other. We lived in our small little worlds, but the world itself started to emerge. This happened slowly at first, and now it's just like you see everybody from everywhere always. But yeah, with things like roads and stuff like that allowed cultures to merge that had these beliefs for millennium, for thousands of years prior. That was the truth that they knew. As like a particular example of this from Japan, right? You talk about like Shinto beliefs in Japan. Well, Shinto is the native beliefs of Japan. Things like every nature and the sun and the moon,
They're all like
Tsukiyomi and
living,
Amaterasu,
have a god in
and yeah,
them. Yeah.
exactly. Everything is a god, and they all have names, and yada yada. That's the native belief of Japan from thousands of years in the past. Very similar to like the native beliefs in Europe, uh, uh, shaman and such.
Mm-hmm.
But then they got influenced by Buddhism. And Buddhism was incredibly popular in Japan. And what happens is that basically these concepts get merged, where a previous Shinto god, now reflects an aspect of Buddhism or the Buddha. And now it's like this weird amalgamation within Japan itself of both of these things simultaneously in a really intriguing way. And I think that it allowed for the cultivation of really interesting stories.
Yeah.
Japan is leading the world in fantasy and manga right now, is the lore that they have inspiring these stories. But that's just one example. It's happening everywhere, always simultaneously, because it's just human nature to be influenced by others. When suddenly somebody comes in with new ideas and you're persuaded, however that ends up happening, then it's like, well, but we've believed this for thousands of years. And they merge in small or large ways. That's just what occurs. And then over time, people forget that they merged or that they were ever indistinct.
Yeah.
And you think of something like Easter as an example, like in Christianity, the way that people celebrate Easter nowadays is you have egg hunts and the Easter bunny and chocolates and such like that. But that is fundamentally a pagan European sort of. It's about
Tradition.
the god of fertility,
Yeah.
basically. And so, it doesn't necessarily take away from the religion that we're celebrating in this way, but most likely there was some culture that became Christian that had already had this celebration on Easter, around Easter, that was really fun or that they enjoyed. And then, a couple hundred years pass, and then people see them doing this, and they're like, "Wow, that's a great event for Easter." And then, time passes, people forget, and then suddenly everyone, this is how you celebrate the event. Um, so it's a big conversation. I also feel like I need to like tiptoe around this somewhat because despite the fact that we're reading a story about One Piece, it's about adventure, right? It's about
Hmm.
finding truths of the world. And as the Strats visit new islands, they uncover things that they wouldn't have known from their little bubbles that they began with. That's kind of the point of it. But actually applying that to the world of One Piece and experiencing the world as it is, adventuring, taking it all in, is also something that a lot of people fear as well. And so, it's a lot of information for some people.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
just as this applies to um, religion and life itself, I think Oda uses that skill as he writes his story, bringing these ideas together in a way which creates, I think, something new and interesting. And yeah, I mean, I guess that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah. It's interesting because yeah, actually, let me just read. Hidden Island came in with a super chat, um, and I think it's fitting with at least some of my ideas. But he said, $20 super chat. Appreciate you, Hidden. He said, love my goats. Real quick, Oda is a gardener because he's always cooking gourmet with the freshest fruits and veggies. I'm talking A1 grade tomatoes, zucchinis, onions, potatoes, yams, always fresh ingredients. Man got a Michelin star, and like it when Hidden says that, right? And I always think about this, and when people say Oda, couldn't have planned all of these things, and you know, did he have a lot of the stuff figured out at the start? And I always think back to the first words of One Piece, which wasn't even the chapter. It was his note that said he's finally gathered all the material he thinks he needs for the story. And like he had been in the industry for I think like a decade prior, not a decade, not that early, but like I think 5 years maybe, working with I forgot who the guy's name is, but working under another person as a assistant, and then he's gathering up all this material. He gets One Piece, right? And he says he has all these things, these resources together, and then you remember the internet doesn't exist. Like he doesn't have Wiki, he doesn't have Google, he doesn't have the internet, and he's just what going to the library. And I think about the people. I think about people who were in the. I used to go to the library a lot when I was a kid, but like to think like of people who used, and I don't know how Japan is, but like people who actually were in the library back then, they were really smart, like insanely smart. I don't know how many people like today frequently go to the library because you don't need to. You have the computer, you have everything at the touch of your hand. But there's some books and some things that you should just get, like you have to get the hard copy, whatever, textbooks and history books and that kind of stuff. But back then, Oda said that, did that, and he had so many references even at the start. It makes you wonder, like, dang, if he had a 5-year story, right? And he said that the last saga is what he had planned originally. I think he came out and said that. People were saying like, "Oh, Oda, how do you foreshadow all these things?" And he's just like laughing because he's like, "No, this is what was originally planned. It was just got delayed essentially." And then when you piece it together, I had this talk with Randy a few times where it's like, imagine he, like you said, in reality, most of the mangaka, most authors in general, they don't know if they're getting a next book or next like more funding, so to say, to combine everything. That's the case with the Avatar: The Last Airbender. This with Korra, Nickelodeon didn't approve them for the second season until the first season was done. They didn't approve them for the third season until the second season was done. And so because of that, they couldn't make a coherent villain story. And that's one of the, at least when it first aired, a lot of people had gripes like, oh man, like it felt so disconnected, it felt disjointed, like you were describing earlier. And versus with Oda, he fell into a lot of fortune as far as how much support he got and how popular his series got. He was unsuspecting of it. I think King Recon was telling, like in Alabasta, he had a few interviews saying that he had no inkling that One Piece would become as big as it is. And he just, you just like look at pre Alabasta, and then you look at the last saga, and I just can't think of a way Oda could have seamlessly got there without what we got in between. You know what I mean? I feel like, yeah, he could have shortened some things up, but if he had a 5-year story like he originally thought, and this was the end point, given what the starting point is, it's like, dang, what did he have cooking to make us get to that part, right? Because like you're saying, like some people are plotters and they have things plotted since the beginning, but some people are gardeners. And right now it feels like Oda originally was a plotter, but then had to become a gardener, and then that gardening ended up expanding his original plot of land, if you were to extend the analogy. And now he has like this entire, not even forest, but like world of stories that now he can like pull from different aspects, which he didn't have originally. But if he's sticking with the original source material, that means that you can kind of cut away at some of the forests, some of the bushes, some of the trees, distracting, and get to the core. And I don't know where the core is anymore. It's so weird given where we're at and where we're getting with Vegapunk, that you look at some of the current storylines and you're just like, how does this connect to the first, where East
How did
Blue?
we get here?
Yeah, how is he gonna get here? It's kind of wild that he at some, yeah, I'm not calling Oda a crackhead, but like if I sat down and I'm like, there's no way you were gonna get to this point from East Blue. Me and Sai were just laughing at Little Garden because we realized in a small part that one of the first, and this is kind of funny given the current circumstances, but one of the first countdowns in an arc was Little Garden with that happy birthday wax cake that spun around, and it was going to turn Zoro into a statue, a white statue. And we're like, that entire thing was so wild in the first place. Like, what a weird, even at the time, I feel like in shonen, in anime and fiction, could you think of a wax birthday cake that spun around until it coated people from the inside, turned one of the most like stoic characters like Zoro, like he's no BS, and then he's now a wax birthday cake statue, and like Luffy is getting, he's seeing giants, and he's seeing like this girl make circles, and he's betraying his own crew. Like that's what we went from. That was pre time skip. That was pre Alabasta. And to make it to where the Gorosei are showing up with a yokai and like their monster demon thing, they look at you and someone dies and they're getting summoned by magic circles. And then there's also Vegapunk who's like actual scientifics, and you're just like, wait, Little Garden? Egghead. There's a lot of parallels, like the giants are here, but that's kind of it. Like the levels of it. Oh, and also another parallel that we just talked about on our podcast was, you know how Oda did the paint thing with in Egghead, just with the bat and everything?
Yeah.
That was in Little Garden too. Mr. 3 painted his, after he made his candle champion, he painted it black with paint. Like that's like the only time in the series I could ever think of that's similar to what Luffy just did now. And
But
the context of Luffy
You know,
doing
just
it now is against gods, and the context of Galdino doing it then is against a pre-god, I guess. So it's just it's so hard to wrap your head around like the gardening and
you,
plotting and all that stuff with Oda.
I think some of the secrets, yeah, I think some of the secret sauce here, to like get under the hood a little bit, you just need to realize that kind of like you, and I'm not comparing you to Oda, but definitely like both of you guys are way different than I am.
Hmm.
He has an insane memory. There is no freaking doubt about it. His memory is on another level. And so being able to or actually having written the story and having these, having thought through the process of creating the things originally, I think that the everything that he has created is still pretty vibrant in his mind. I think it makes it really easy for him to do those parallels constantly, basically. And he can also be reminded as well, as far as from his editors and such like that. Especially, now it's just these parallels are intentional. Like this has been all of Egghead. We've spent basically the entire Egghead arc talking about the parallels. And so, it's just at some point in time he decided like that would be something that would represent his story of history sort of repeating itself. Um, and coupled with his memory, it's just I honestly think that this also helps him write the story. It makes it almost easier. Of
Hmm.
like, look, starting from scratch with like a blank sheet is really hard. Of like trying to figure out what's there, but taking something and then being able to repurpose it or reimagine it, I find to be a lot easier. I wonder if Oda is the same. So it's like, well, uh, it just naturally lends itself to being able to Oda's strengths, I guess. So with the paint, for instance, he remembered or was reminded of Miss Golden Week's powers, in that arc, and it's like, hey, it would be great. I could use this in a way that fans would enjoy. Maybe he also knew, like you said, of recent comments about black blades or coatings and such, and that's what created that thought. It's just trying to delve into his mind. I feel like is a whole assignment that um, basically like it's so big that we'll never know.
Yeah, yeah. Here's a specific question that actually Hidden Island just put up was I wonder how long Oda had the idea for Egghead for. It feels like the entire arc was written with the intention from the start. So like with Egghead specifically, this is actually valuable for the video that's about to come out on my channel. But with Egghead specifically, do you feel like that's plotted or it grew throughout the series?
Well, I think basically everything grew throughout the series. That's my headcanon.
Okay,
Everything,
everything.
basically, with rare exception. But Egghead as an island, I think, has been an old idea at the same time. Like,
Hmm.
as in within the first few years of One Piece, that Oda knew that he wanted to do a future island. Going all the way back to Enel, the cover story, visiting the moon. I think
Yep.
at that point in time, he knew that his story was going to have this sort of scope. I almost mentioned Gurren Lagann in a theory recently as well. But
Ooh.
one of the great things about that series is how it spirals. And you start off like below the surface, and then you end up in galactic warfare, and
Wait, you're a
it's
Gurren
just
Lagann
One
fan
Piece
like
is
that?
similar. Absolutely.
Oh,
Um,
okay. All right. Okay. I respect. Me and you birds of a feather then automatically. Gurren Lagann is one of my
yeah, well,
favorites.
not only is it compelling just to follow, it's like Dante's Inferno in a sense.
Hmm.
Like what's compelling about the nature of that story is that the further you go down to hell, it's like the story evolves in a sense. And it creates like these like markers that you can follow along. I actually do this. He doesn't precisely lay out the markers, but the story of One Piece has itself been growing. And this is just a natural thing that keeps like stories for this long don't usually work like this as continuous stories without an element like that. Like
Hmm.
you've got to constantly escalate what you're doing. You can even think like something like Dragon Ball, which is mainly fighting and power scaling and stuff like that. But it's first like let's win the tournament. Oh, let's defend the Earth. Oh, let's defend the galaxy and then universe, etc. It just grows like that. And I think that Oda knew that from relatively early on.
Mm-hmm.
where he's like, okay, I need to have an idea about how my story is going to spiral in a way that's organized, and that's really benefited the story.
So, uh, I like where we're at with the egghead conversation of the pre-planning, because I feel like it is such a weird thing to wrap your mind around, because a lot of the references are like retro in the first place as far as like the visuals. But like as far as starting out the last saga with this arc, it does make you feel like this was in Oda's original script, which is like most of it was, but then at the same time it's weird because it's the connection point of all these plot lines that grew as the story grew. And so I could see a way where Oda minimized like the Gear 5, like, instead of Sun God Nika, Warrior of Liberation, all these different epithets, whatever, it was a smaller in capacity as the 5 year mark went. But it was still Vegapunk who ended up telling us about Devil Fruits. It was still Vegapunk, telling us about what the history was of the ancient kingdom. And so a lot of these various aspects, whether it's the seraphim or holograms, whatever, Oda just kind of amplified it as he went on. But with Egghead specifically, I'm curious because with I kept on saying a certain reference with Vegapunk's head shape. Do you find it interesting? Because to me, like, this is something I talk about in the video, but we know that he's supposed to look like Einstein, but isn't it interesting that he has the same head shape as Jimmy Neutron? It's such a random head shape. It's not even an
But
egg.
it's not random though, because it's like I feel like Oda has a lot of these simple childish thoughts, which he
Yeah,
translates into joke. I feel like
yeah,
Oda enjoys life immensely,
yeah,
so he's like, well, the smartest man in the world's got to have the biggest brain, right?
yeah,
And so he's like thinking about it, like you would be thinking about something just totally random, going on a tangent of, well, if he has a big brain, if it's too wide, right, he would just fall. So it needs to go straight up, and he balances it like it's like he's on a totem,
yeah.
and that's part of the design process. I feel like for him, I think he really enjoys that.
It's funny because Jimmy Neutron had an episode where Sheen's brain ends. Basically, he gets Vegapunk's Devil Fruit. He remembers everything infinitely, and his brain continues to grow straight up. And Sheen has the same hairline as Vegapunk, so I put that in the video. But how about this? This is an interesting one, and I don't want to like talk too much about the video because it's supposed to be just a fun like, whoa, there's this many connections. But I'm fine with spoiling this one as far as be if for the people who are watching the stream. How common in specifically Egghead in your mind with Egghead, Vegapunk split himself, cloned himself 6 times, each with different personalities to get things done. That how many other series do you think like that kind of trope exists? Is that common? Do you know other series that did that?
Naruto is similar with
Okay.
Pain. Um,
Okay. Yeah, Pain
uh,
is interesting. Is it?
yeah,
It
because
was,
he
it was like
well
less of a clone thing, but more of like him controlling these other, and that had to
powers,
do with
the
the
dead bodies. Yep.
yeah, that had to do with the Buddhism thing, right? Like the
Mhm.
different hells, right?
Mhm.
Um,
Yep. The samsara, the cycle of life and death,
yeah,
these
yeah,
paths that you can be reborn to.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to actually answer your question, like, no, I'm not familiar with many things that have done it quite like this. But I think that similar to how Buddhism in creating pain, I
Uh-huh.
think that Oda has similarly been influenced by the same concepts, and that might relate to Vegapunk as well. Speaking about his brain growing up to the heavens, like Oda cooks at a level that sometimes we can't fathom, But I really think that it's a thought in his mind of like, look, the smarter that Vegapunk gets, the closer that he gets to God, and
Mm,
it's physically represented by his brain making him taller,
mm-hmm.
like
And also a
that sort of
threat
thought. I think
for
that
like the Gorosei too.
yeah, it's just I think that One Piece is, this can be controversial, but it's got religious undertones. Religion is an important part of the story. I think that um, this becomes even more clear the further that we get into it. Now that we have the sun god, now that we have the Church of Nika, and so I think ultimately this is the story is a parable or um, I forget the other word for this. I always forget it, but it's like a
Allegory.
short story to allegory. Thank you.
Yeah.
An allegory of Buddhism.
Hmm.
And so along with all of that, there's just I think that was a natural source material for Oda to use in creating One Piece. So that's what I think inspired the Vegapunk altars,
So
and we can see aspects of this.
what if I told
Go
you
ahead.
that in Jimmy Neutron, you might remember this now. Jimmy Neutron split himself into six clones, each with their own personality. One of them was evil Jimmy. And the plot line was essentially essentially by the end of it there was a traitor, and the traitor said the world only needs one Jimmy Neutron. And I was like, and when you look at the like some of them, you're like, hold on, this is kind of similar to what Oda did with the thing. And I'm not joking. This is it's one episode, but it's a recurring thing with the evil Jimmy. He comes back, and so much so that apparently so Jimmy Neutron, not that it got canceled, they just didn't continue it. Season 4 was supposed to open up with evil Jimmy. Um, but so like again, I'm not gonna spoil the entire video, but it's connect like this level of egghead connection where it's Vegapunk made six clones, each with their own personality, to in order to increase the efficiency. That's 1-to-1 to Jimmy Neutron. There's like seven others of that level connections that I'm going to talk about in this video that's posted probably later, like probably at night tonight, where I'm just like, hold on, this is crazy. And to give other people, some people might know because I've talked about it on the podcast a little bit, but the reason why Jimmy Neutron, I think, like could be even more so on Oda's radar than just something random is that Jimmy Neutron was actually like a record breaking development in CGI. It cut CGI productions for movies in half, uh, compared to its contemporaries, and it also won awards for its CGI at a time when again there was no computers. This is 1995 that it won these awards, and it was just like dang. And it ended up being so. To give people a little bit more insight, Jimmy Neutron was originally Johnny Quasar. And Johnny Quasar was the thing that aired in 1995. But the reason why it could have more notoriety than Meets the Eyes, which I explain in depth in the video. But the reason why is because it was distributed with as a demo for all the CGI software that ended up being used for Star Trek, for Avatar, like the Blue People Avatar, for a bunch Babylon 5, Battle of Star Galactica, like all these different insane projects. Some of them that Oda is actually fans of, and so so all these people who bought this software or had the demo that would use it for their studio, they would always see a 3-second clip of the Johnny Quasar, the precursor to Jimmy Neutron, and just have no context. And all it was is Jimmy and his dog. That's what it was. And it was just like, wait, what? How did this happen? But
I think that there's a lot here. Honestly, like that could be the case. As a different example to sort of illustrate the same concept is Harry Potter obviously is a big thing. But if you watch
oh, and Harry Potter, yeah.
children's the children's movies from the 1990s, before J.K. Rowling wrote the first book of Harry Potter, you realize that Harry Potter was directly inspired by things like James and the Giant Peach and uh, Matilda. And there's just every time I watch these, I notice them, but it's absurdly. What's that one movie with Robin Williams and the green goo?
Oh, I'm so
Remember what that
bad.
is?
I'm so bad with
Anyway, it doesn't matter. There's a
yeah.
ton of them. But it's very clear. She also had kids at the time,
Uh-huh.
but she wanted to write a kid's story, and so she watched all the kids' content, the big
Flubber.
movies and such. In order, Flubber, yep, that was it. In order
Thank you,
to
Kevin.
the narrative, and it's very clear Oda does the same thing. Like he takes in um, content, like pop culture, what of the past, of the present, all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he's first creating One Piece, also the timelines here match up pretty well. But when he's first creating One Piece, what is he doing? Well, this is ultimately supposed to be a thing that appeals to kids. That's supposed to be a lot of fun. So did he watch Jimmy Neutron? mean, I don't know how that was distributed in Japan, but it seems in America it was huge.
Yeah.
So yeah, it seems really possible to me.
Yeah. And what's it called? The Oh, in the video I referenced one SBS where Oda admitted like he subconsciously added a TV show. There was like some person noticed that there was like in the 73rd squad of the Navy, there's a commander Purin, and Oda drew the haircut exactly 1-to-1 to this show called Purin, the Tales of Purin, which was a puppet show that his older sister watched when he was a kid, and he completely, in the SBS at least, he made it sound like, wow, I completely forgot. That was like a vague memory. I must have like just added in without like recognizing. And it kind of makes sense because it's like it's just a side character, but it's a 1-to-1 name, everything. And so even on that level, like yeah, like Oda probably just absorbed really popular things and introduced them in different ways. And that's also what's interesting with Oda too. It's like even if you were to draw a parallel, which is why I don't consider this video that's coming out today as a full theory. It's more like, hey guys, look at these connections and look at where I might be thinking, and feel free to go nuts because I feel like there's something there. And honestly, it sky's the limits with where Oda could go with that particular direction with Jimmy Neutron, because there's like inventions, so many different things. You look at Egghead, it's like 1-to-1. Even like I'm not going to talk more about that, but one thing I did want to shift gears to was your recent Moon Piece video. And it was a 44-minute video. I did watch it. It's a fun watch. It's a great watch, actually, because you jump to different topics throughout it. One of them, it's personal favorite. My viewers would understand, because you like, not that you skate around the possibility, but you acknowledge that's like sort of elemental hockey could be at play here with like the fire and the love and whatever. And that's kind of like with the elemental hockey thing. If it were me, I would have said elemental hockey straight up. But I understand. People will be like, oh, what? This doesn't exist in One Piece. You can't say these things. But so if you want to give people just like a quick rundown of what you talk about without spoiling, I'll let you handle that, and then we can talk about that a little bit because I'm interested in some of the
Yeah.
points you make there.
I feel like you can't talk about it at all without spoiling. But it's just one of those interesting things that I like about theory crafting is the different processes that the way that people think about the story, that which can lend itself to theories. But I would say that the source of inspiration for this video, really, when I began, was why are the Gorosei named after planets? Like, what is Oda cooking there? What was the thought process behind it? How can we make sense of it? And so, um, basically, it's like once that idea was in my mind, it's like, how can we connect this to other things that are also mysteries? So, long story short is that the concept of the video is that the world of One Piece is similar to our own world in the sense that the people worshipped stars, the moon, and the sun. They were important to theology from the dawn of man. And obviously, you have the sun god Nika, that makes sense, but this also applies to things like the planets. The planets, as we know, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto. I probably missed one there, Earth. But these names are based off of Roman mythology, or even before that, Greek mythology. They literally possess the names of gods, and we have a globe in O'Hara, which has a lot of like people have been speculating about this for a very very long time, and basically, if you look at this globe, the Earth of One Piece, the blue planet, has 6 moons, and one moon has a moon. Uh, which is interesting that the scholars of O'Hara decided to create this when throughout the entirety of the story has only ever been one moon. You would have, and you can throw in things like Capone was sucked up by a moon-like object, so maybe there's two, but in the actual sky, there's only one, which doesn't make sense based on this globe that we've seen. But
To the
with
point
with the
that
scholars of O'Hara,
up until Alabasta, Oda had been drawing the moon cycle similar to ours in that you could track the days by looking at the moon, which is something that Artur Library O'Hara he's commented on and a few others. But like you can actually count the days based off the moon. That's how like exactly one moon there is that you could do something like that.
Right. Yeah. Well, and even talking about the moon itself, that was an important part of the story from the very beginning. And I'm not just talking about Kuro, right? Kuro saw the crescent moon and it enraged his blood or something to that effect. But in the one-shot versions of One Piece, the villain that Luffy had to fight was called Crescent Moon, some name I can't remember. And that was his symbol, was the crescent
Oh
moon.
yeah.
So he's had these thoughts for a while. I think it also relates to Buddhism as well, or Shinto Buddhist belief of basically Amaterasu, Tsukiyomi, and Susanoo, which is also related to Naruto as well, but the sun, the moon, and the sea. I think that was something that Oda initially began with as like, I'm gonna cook with this at some point in time. But
Hmm.
long story short is these moons are there in Clover's globe, but we don't actually see them in the world. However, Clover was researching things that related to the Void Century, missing history, so to speak. So it's fair to assume that this isn't just this is actually something, and Oda could use this. I think that he will. Part of the discussion around this is whether it's a heliocentric or a geocentric model. So basically, is this like the Earth at the center of the solar system, or is the Sun at the center of the solar system? And a lot of people say, well, since we don't see these moons in the actual sky, it's a geocentric model, meaning that they're not meant to represent moons, they actually represent planets.
Hmm.
But I never really liked that idea because in any geocentric model, you would also include the sun. There would be a literal sun as part of this circling around the Earth. It's not there. So I think that they are destroyed moons.
Hmm.
And specifically, I think that all the moons had names of the planets that the Gorosei have today. And these moons were destroyed sometime in the Void Century, and the Gorosei have taken their place. Um, but yeah, there's so much. It's a 44-minute video. There's no
Yeah.
way that I can summarize it all. But
Yeah.
that's
I mean,
basically the idea of it. And then we get into like religion and stuff like that. Of like, what is the actual celestial dragon religion? Why is it that there? How does it relate with Nika? And basically tell the story that is missing in a very headcanon way.
right. And so that was actually one part that I liked with the how you viewed the globe on O'Hara, because I had a similar like I don't necessarily care to be right on what that particularly means, but the existence of it is significant enough that Oda included that in a world where like Nami, for example, is supposed to make a map of the whole world. And the thing is, to make a globe like that, the way you would need talented cartographers. So like on my end, I was looking at it like, wait, where's this group of cartographers? Because we have ancient shipwrights like the legendary shipwright guild, right? That's making these crazy ships like Pluton or Noah possibly. Um, and then we have the scholars that have 5,000 years of history. But then what about this cartographer? Like that's not like this isn't just archaeology to make this thing. There's something else significant here, and where did that information go? And so I talk about that from an angle of like um that could be like Nami could be related to that group who made this thing, which again we talked about in the DMs how like we focus on similar details and we take it to completely different angles. And so when you were talking about how like yeah these moons had different like I think you were saying Burka was essentially like a colony of some sort, right? Which, makes sense given where they were. There was a detail that I don't know if you paid attention to, but you already said like okay like Burka was from prior to the Void Centuries because they talked about it in the poneglyph or like whatever
The
history.
Sky Island.
Yeah. So it might be that they originally were from the blue from Earth or whatever Earth is called in One Piece, and then they went to the moon, made their colony, then whatever happened, it was missing, and then there was like wars and whatever, and we can get into that part later. But um something that I always thought was interesting was that cover story also relates to Vegapunk. You know that, right? The Enel cover story?
Yeah, because island in Dr. Tsukimi,
Yeah, and so do
as well
you
as the automata as well. We see something that looks like automata in Egghead.
and the yes, the automata in Egghead, the automata there, and then obviously the automata that we saw on Earth too, right? And so the other part of it, and I had a old video, I think is my Void Century video. So like in that cover story, Oda reveals to us Karakuri Island, but Karakuri Island in our timeline is a frozen wasteland that Vegapunk had to geothermally tap in order to make it hospitable again. But in the Enel flash or in the cover story, it's a Japanese summer island where they're just wearing kimonos and there's no snow. And so I took that as like, oh, that's crazy because that means that not only is there a time gap in this flashback, because Anel shows up in our timeline on the moon, which would mean that it's frozen when Anel goes there. When Anel's on the moon, Karakuri Island is frozen. But when the automata go to the moon, it's not frozen. So that's a whole time gap. Unless like it froze over in the last 100 years, which wouldn't really make sense because Vegapunk is kind of that old in the first place. That means that those automatas that went up to the moon during Dr. Tsukimi's time is from way back in the past. And so like we can't say what time. I assumed maybe pre-Void Century, and so the hook on that video is saying that this might be the only panel of pre-Void Century that Oda actually showed us, not told us, and he just never said it. And the major part of it is that like, hey, wouldn't that mean there's like some kind of ice age that happened, right? How would you get from a summer Japanese island that like is so frozen over that the only way to solve it, Vegapunk had to geothermally tap it, and he still failed? And yet we saw it as a summer island where they were just wearing like not like they were wearing, I forget what they were wearing, but Dr. Tsukimi was basically just wearing like summer clothes and not on the winter island, whereas like they were dying of freezing temperatures. And so ice age and stuff like that. And I wonder, like when you were talking about the wars over the races, did you ever think about like maybe the environment in play in that scope too, like possibly the flooding? I know Dax Sake's in here, he's talked about flooding, I've talked about ice age and flooding and stuff like that. How does that fit with this war theory that you're talking about? Because I know you had like the fishmen, the mink, the lunarians, they all could have been warring races at some point, right? Do you think that, and I think you ended up saying that the lunarians are too OP, and then but then you look back and like maybe the fishmen were too OP, maybe the minks were, maybe there's different, why is Zunisha so big and stuff like that. So in your theory, I don't think you talked about the environment, and maybe that would be fun context for people to think about, and then they jump into the video if you want to share that.
Yeah, so first I want to bring some thoughts to Karakuri Island because this is interesting, I'm just saying this to like expand our thoughts here because I feel like there's a whole conversation here. But like you said, in Dr. Tsukimi's flashback, we can see them as they're watching the moon and they're out on the balcony and it's peaceful and it's warm and temperate, and clearly that is not the case anymore. But part of the reason why I didn't include that in the video or talk about that, and it's hard to include this in any headcanon
Ooh,
is because when the automata traveled to the moon, they were defeated
wait, hold on,
in present day.
it cut out.
So
They
it
were
makes
defeated, that's where it cut out. The automata traveled to the moon.
defeated. Oh, and we're defeated by the
Yeah,
space
yeah,
pirates.
yeah, yeah.
That looked very similar to the ones that we encountered, and and so that makes this make less sense. I feel like as
Mhm.
far as the distant past. Now, a couple years in the past, that makes a lot more sense to me. But then you can also throw out thoughts like this of there's actually confirmed multiple, for instance, Shimotsuke villages.
Mhm.
Shimotsuke in the East Blue, created from people that traveled from Wano, and the Shimotsuke clan. So this could be the case of two Karakuri Islands, basically, of inhabited from people that was there was another Karakuri in the past, and they separated in some way, but basically named the places the same. That's
Ooh,
a possibility.
okay, okay.
So but I don't really know. This is
Mhm.
just totally up for interpretation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I would say my actual headcanon is that there's a couple of years
Mhm.
between when we see the Tsukimi flashback, and then we get to Enel on the moon. And
It
possibly
so it
this
would have
relates
to
to.
be, it would have to be greater than Vegapunk's age minimum, right? Because we know that Vegapunk was a kid on that island, and so he geothermally tapped as a kid, failed. What, like, I forget. I think we do have his age to some extent because we have the his age in the Ohara thing with Dragon. I think he's 43 there. So that was 20 years ago, and 22 years ago, so it's like minimum 66. So Enel goes there 66 years later, and let's just say Vegapunk was 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever kid means in that flashback. So that means that minimum there's plus 60 years in between Enel, Vegapunk's being a kid, and then whenever Karakuri, unless like you said, maybe it's a separate island, right? So then in the video, I was pointing out that yes, it looks like similar people are attacking the automata, but then I pointed out they're using slightly different weapons, and I was like, huh, the new weapons look a little bit more advanced, and I was like, maybe this was Oda's crazy way of like hiding this detail. And I think I had made this video at the time when we knew. Oh, we knew the Germa clones at the time. I don't think we knew like Vegapunk's level of cloning besides the pacifistas, which I was like, maybe this is like that. And so um it is interesting. It's one of those details. I didn't throw it out there to like, break any of the headcans. It was just more so like it's wild because there's small details like that, especially in Egghead where we're recognizing it's like a small detail like that, and then Oda makes it huge, and we're like, oh wow, like the Giants, right? Like it's such a small thing, and then now there's such a large part of the story. But when it was happening, nobody thought the Giants were coming, and now they're here, right? And it could make a lot of sense given that small detail of them already knowing Sun God Nika, which I think we already knew, but like because so much time had passed, people didn't really put a lot of stock into like, oh, they're thematically connected to these to Luffy. So if they're the island next over and they hear about Luffy, why wouldn't they come in, right? And it's moments like that where it's like, huh, this is such a small detail in a Nell story where it's like, why is this a summer island when we know it's such a winter island that Vegapunk couldn't even solve it? And why have it that be that, yeah, it would mean that it's at least over 60 years of time difference between when Anel got there and when the first automata had gotten there. And then I talk about how like the different designs are there, but ultimately I came to a similar conclusion as you, where it's like it's not that they left from the moon, they were originally from the moon and went to the earth. I felt like it was they were on the earth, went to the moon, and at some point they forgot about that history, and that might mean something about the void century itself, or that just might be how history works in the first place, where you end up losing it if if you establish a moon base of people and they have a disconnect from the earth people. You let 100 years go by, and yeah, it's like, damn, what happened? Who are we? Like you kind of forget if you don't tell the
Yep.
stories, right? um so I thought that was an interesting thing when you were talking about how like maybe the multiple moons had different races. And oh, sorry, I'm putting words in the theory, but is that kind of a takeaway at least from the video, right? Would you say that's an accurate takeaway?
Sort of. Not really.
Okay.
So the idea of the theory is that we associate the advance in technology in the One Piece world with the Void Century, right? The Ancient Kingdom. Ancient Kingdom was highly advanced, more advanced than Vegapunk themselves. But I make an argument that the world actually began to advance before the Void Century, before the Ancient Kingdom. Things like the Fishmen, as an example, can be um, a a modified species based on lineage factor and stuff like that. Very similar to the technology that we currently have at our disposal that, for instance, Judge Vinspoke or Vegapunk has. And the Ancient Kingdom ultimately made this greater by taking all of this that had already existed, maybe bringing it together. But long story short is the moons were originally uninhabited. That is my belief. There's
Hmm.
no species that actually came from the moon. That's just totally headcanon. You can believe differently.
Right.
A lot of this is totally gray. But technology was created before the Void Century in order to visit the moons. But there was nothing there. And at the same time, I combine this with the thought that humanity themselves have always worship the stars. No matter where you're from, in the distant past, we've all had a fascination with the stars. These moons, our moon included within that. And so they're often associated with or actually deified. And this is certainly true in Japan as well with Shintoism, Tsukiyomi. And so they were gods. They actually visited the moons, found out that they were uninhabited, and then humans decided to become these gods that everyone already believed in, and basically hid the truth that it's just these are moons. And then from there, you start to develop the moons, develop the civilizations on the moon surrounding the gods. So, as an example, and the moon that remains in the sky, right? We know that this is related to the winged race, the Shandians, the Burkins, and the Skypians. But the Skypians, the actual leader of the Skypians is called God. The same was true of the Burkins, I presume. With the Shandians who landed on the Blue Sea, they worshipped a god as well, the snake,
Mm-hmm.
Nola. And so, it's like, well, if their leader now is still referred to as God, and that's an important part that still connects them to this day, then I assume that the leader of the moon, when they lived there in Burka, on the moon, was also God. So it's literal moon God. And I apply that to all the other moons as well. Basically, like each of these was a god. Humans ended up terraforming these moons, or maybe some of them were just simply habitable. And the leader of them, all six of them, was at one point in time God, but they were human. And so things like the Skypians looking like angels, but somebody like Enel doesn't actually have wings. I like to think of like there's this like powerful devil fruit user on each of the moons, and then from there they have their cult or they're following their priests and such surrounding that theology.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is how the moons initially were, um, I guess, in the like 1400 years ago, something to that effect.
Okay.
But then, because they're actual humans that are ruling over these planets, these moons, then it becomes something to fight over, right? This is power. Being God is power. They are, in fact, just humans that have eaten powerful devil fruits. So there's conflict, and this leads to wars to become the king of these worlds or these king of these moons and become a literal god. And I think that this is what inspired a lot of the creation of the different races in the One Piece world, as far as like soldiers. And this leads to like something like the Lunarians, which are maybe invented as perhaps maybe like a defense force to protect the Moon Kings or the Moon Gods, or maybe somebody from the Blue Sea is like, Zihaha, I'm gonna take him out with this new invention that, who knows.
Mm-hmm.
But long story short is they created the Lunarians, and the Lunarians were so absurdly strong that they were able to defeat the Enels of the past and become the moon gods themselves. So you go from this period of like the moons are just in the sky, they can visit them, to wow, now we actually have humans colonizing these things and becoming gods themselves, to they are now replaced by their greatest creations, the Lunarians. And of course, we know the Lunarians are defeated as well. And so this leads into the Void Century, which is that basically the sun god Nika, or Joyboy, defeated the Lunarians before the Void Century even began,
Mm-hmm.
900 years ago. And then because the Lunarians would have been viewed probably very similar to the Celestial Dragons are today, power corrupts, that sort of thing. Like they, um, their atrocities over time accumulated. And so Joyboy, the person who defeated them, became a hero.
Okay. Wait, and
This fundamental.
oh, sorry, it cut out. What were you saying?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say because I don't think you went too far into this part in your video, but as far as Nika intertwining, like you're saying, defeated the Lunarians, but I remember you said something along the lines of you also think that Nika was like some kind of like superhuman type of like amalgamation of different things. What exactly were you getting at with that part?
Yeah, so this goes back to religious syncretism, which
Mm-hmm.
is that the sun god or the sun itself was worshipped from the dawn of humanity. It could be true that Nika, as a devil fruit is created from people's desires. It's just based on simply a god that was originally worshipped on the blue planet, along with its contemporaries. And so uh, uh, Joyboy has eaten the Nika fruit, but is also this god that is just ancient, that
Mm-hmm.
actually was a big part of the history of the One Piece world. Maybe it's just the devil fruit all along. Who knows? I'm not too sure what you mean by like Nika being different or whatever.
Well, I
Um,
so the
but
reason I was gonna ask, or going down this line of logic, is because I find it interesting whenever somebody talks about like Nika's role in the ancient kingdom. I want to know their perspective of like what what not defeated Nika, but especially now where we have the legendary Iron Giant getting up and saying, "I'm sorry, Joyboy," and then we have Zunisha saying that too, and then you put in this scope of like the Lunarians, so to say. So does that mean like the legendary Iron Giant was also against Lunarians, or and Zunisha was like what like the Lunarians were with the world government, like that kind of distinction? How does that fall into line with like these
yeah.
compartments in the story, I guess?
So this is tough, and I'm sure that a lot of people have really strong opinions. And at the end of the day, I want to reiterate, we do not know.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to, you fit the pieces together however it makes sense to you. But
Mm-hmm.
what you need to bear in mind is that the Void Century was 100 years long. That is a very long time. For things to potentially change over the course of that 900 years, potentially change even before then as well. So my general headcanon is that the Lunarians, as the gods, which we know that they were formerly gods of the One Piece world, predates the Void Century. So essentially, they were gods from 900 years ago and before that to
Okay.
to some cutoff line. I don't know. But like Luffy is doing in the story right now with the Celestial Dragons, most likely they'll be dethroned. I think Joyboy, the very beginning of the Void Century, so 900 years ago, dethroned the Lunarians in a similar
Mm.
way as Luffy is about to do. But then a question of like, okay, well, what's the world going to be like after this? And so we already see this planted throughout the story in various places, but like people right now are starting to deify Sabo. He is literally becoming a god. That is what they're referring to him as. We see this in other places as well with Usopp. Usopp is literally being deified. He's becoming a god. Luffy, that's an obvious example as well. So the world essentially has to decide what is the god that's going to rule the world after the ones that are currently, because that's just humanity has always done this. And so I think that the world collectively decided that Joyboy
Ooh, wait, hold on. You cut
as
out. Joyboy has collectively was the
uh,
last thing that we heard.
collectively start from sooner than that. What did I say before Joyboy is collectively?
I think it was having to do with the world government, and then collecting the like allies against the world government.
Hmm. I don't remember. Long story short is that the world needs a god to worship,
Mm-hmm.
and Oda's setting that up right now with Sabo, with Usopp, and with Luffy himself. And so when Joyboy defeated the Lunarians before the Void Century, then the world collectively decided that Joyboy was now God. But Joyboy, I think, is a character very similar to Luffy, meaning that he didn't want any part of that. So this is just created around him. And so then in the actual Void Century, the 100 years, I imagine this as being far more dynamic, I think, than a lot of people do currently. Of that, like at the beginning of the Void Century was a different time than at the middle of the Void Century was a different time than at the end of the Void Century. This was a one piece story unto itself. And whether we get that or not, I like that thought. I think that that is also a little bit more realistic as well. But so you begin the Void Century with Joyboy as this hero character, just like Luffy is. Like the Lost are gods, it's in relative chaos, and he's sort of through helping his friends, their organization starts to form. He's saving people, he's being a hero. And then, right, you reach a point in time where the world is no longer burning. It's no longer chaotic. He's established himself as the king of the world through brute force, even though he does not desire this. And so because of this, right, it's like, well, I have nothing else to do but what I want to do, which is adventure. So you get a story like Odin, right? So Odin, after he conquered Curry, after he tamed the lawless land, he went on his pirate adventure to discover the truths of the world and just, be somebody who's very similar to Luffy and very similar to Joyboy, in my opinion. And then he comes back after having done this, and things are different, right? and the way that I headcanon this is which they worshipped him as the sun god, is itself this powerful entity similar to the Vatican. Um,
Hmm.
it may not be exactly like that, but church religion as being a source of power in the world is a common thing. Oda might draw inspiration from that, but you also have this interesting concept of like, well, religious. Um, syncretism, which is that these past beliefs aren't forgotten either. And no religion really conquers the world. That's not how it works.
Right.
And so you still have people that believe in the moons as equal to the sun, and because time passes, right, people's ideas change, and so there could be a faction that changes it somewhat. And it's like, well, we used to believe in these all of these gods, but the sun god is the one true god, so to speak. And so I tie this in with the symbol that we see on the Kozuki clan crest as well as everywhere else, including the Nika symbol on the church, which is the one big orb surrounded by 8 small ones. The big orb being the sun god and the 8 ones being the moons. And being related to how these people worshipped the celestial bodies in general and how that sort of developed over time. But the headcanon is that there's a character similar to Orochi that basically took over this church with the plan of destroying the other moons, and ultimately undermining the sun god themselves, maybe to become a god, who knows.
Hmm.
But yeah, and that leads to the end of Joyboy's story at the closer to 800 years ago, where you have things like potentially the ancient weapons can be used as a threat, similar to how Orochi used a threat of taking people's lives in order to stay Odin and
Yeah.
essentially turn him into a fool. And this theory starts to balloon spectacularly when you start to connect it with everything else that I've talked about on my channel. Like we did a video talking about Drum Island connections with Joyboy, and basically looked at the parallels of the story through all the characters that are similar to Joyboy or Joyboy candidates.
Hmm.
And like for instance, Dr. Hiruluk, or Odin, or right, there's elements of all of these stories that are
Yeah.
similar, and by finding the similar connections between them, you might actually find the story of Joyboy himself. And so one of the commonalities, and similar to Odin and Dr. Hiruluk, is becoming a fool. Right,
Hmm.
basically the world turns against Joyboy, and so that's part of my headcanon as well. It's
Well,
like
so here's
Joyboy and
something
Drum.
with the daimyo thing that struck me when I was watching the video was um like you had said that there's 6 moons minus one, there's five, then we have the Gorosei. It's like, maybe like if the numbers line up, maybe these names were previously these other moons, but then now they were destroyed for some reason. And then we go to the daimyo. There was 5 regions, and plus the shogun, which at the time I guess was the Kozuki, and inside that 5 daimyo there was the Kurozumi, which ended up becoming a traitor of some sort, right? Like they ended up conspiring against the rest of them, and actually, as far as we know, basically killed the other ones. Like we don't know the full capacities, whether some left or ran, but they were poisoning them, right? So I did have a question as far as, do you feel like that could relate to the Gorosei? Maybe with the moons, the one that survived is maybe they were the traitor. They were like you said, they were like the Kurozumi, but maybe even more so. They were the ones who actually took out the other moons, or in at least that might be the case for the moons, but with the Gorosei, do you feel like there might be a similar situation with the current Gorosei, that there was a traitor Gorosei?
Yeah, so again, take this however you want to. Once again,
Hmm.
this is wildly headcanon. But in that same Drum Island video, we talked about how the 20 doctors from Drum Island might be a parallel of the 20 kings. And so if you
Hmm.
follow the 20 doctors in the story of Drum Island, you realize like, oh, they were basically forced to join the king. They were blackmailed, and most of the doctors originally were actually killed.
Hmm.
And then by the end of the story, when Luffy comes to defeat Wapol, they join the good guy's side and they heal Dalton. So my idea
Mm.
for how all of this worked is that there's a like character that was a traitor, basically worshipped the traitor moon that we still see in the sky. And they took over the church with the intention of undermining both the sun god and the other moon gods and destroying them, and maybe casting the world in darkness so that that moon can reign supreme over the heavens. Uh, but this was not Emu. This was not the Gorosei. I think that Emu and the Gorosei are related to the other moons that were destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
And so Joyboy at the end of the Void Century defeated this Orochi-like character, this Blackbeard-like character, and then from this point in time, the world began to be ruled by Emu and the 20 kings who were associated with the destroyed moons, who were rightfully pissed off that their moons were destroyed. And so that's how I piece this together. I'm not saying that Emu didn't play an important role in the defeat of Joyboy potentially. Again, this could be like something like the Revolutionary Army, where the 20 kings,
Yeah.
they were enemies to both Joyboy and the Nika Church, bearing in mind that Orochi became the shogun of Wano. So basically, you can think of him as becoming the sun god. He took that preeminent place. And so, they were enemies to Joyboy as well. And they maybe instigated or started this war against Joyboy's kingdom, the ancient kingdom, which was associated with worship of the sun god. Um, and I hope, does any of this make sense?
No, it is, and it's really confusing because it's like the hypotheticals of like these theories, but you're going off of like parallels that we have, which is why it's like it makes a lot of sense. And I'm like playing with the Revolutionary Army point because that's where I want to go, add on to what you're talking about, but more so of do you, I'll ask this question later, but keep going with the specific sides. I really like the idea of the doctor's part too, as far as the blackmailing and how the world government got together in the
Yeah.
first place.
So I just think that the Void Century was as complex as the current story is in terms of factions, right?
Yeah.
So you have pirates, you have the Revolutionary Army, you potentially have the Marines, which separate themselves. You have Emu as and the world government itself. Like this is there's a lot of things going on. Likewise, I like to believe that the Void Century had a lot of things going on as well. Most likely, how I see it playing out in the future of the story is that it's going to be characters like Sabo, Vivi,
Mm-hmm.
and Kobe are incredibly important, and that they will help come together in order to define a better future. So the Marines don't need to be destroyed, right? Kobe can be their leader. The government doesn't need to be destroyed. Vivi can represent what the government can become. The revolutionaries, right? They need to not totally destroy the world government. And so, in a sense, like Sabo, as he's being deified, can't become God. And so, the idea that I have in my head is that, look, it's interesting. Like I think Sabo, even though he's actively being deified, at some point in time will actually have to tell the people, like, look, I am a noble as well. I am of royal blood. I am not, because they're going to turn on the celestial dragons, right? And there's
Mm-hmm.
association with that in the nobles. And so, yes, I'm this figure that you guys worship, but I'm just the same as these other people, so that we can go into a more peaceful future without holding these grudges, which I think is important in the story, going to like Fishman Island as an example of um, of don't influence the children with this hate concepts. I'm sure that I could be more eloquent there, but it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short, though, is so with the Void Century, I like the idea that the Revolutionary Army is ultimately the one that won during that time. So it's like
Ooh.
an alternate universe where the faction which represents the Revolutionary Army today ends up taking control. And so, I'm not saying that Dragon is evil, right? But I'm
Uh-huh.
just saying that when they destroy the structure that was before, they then create a new structure, and from that it gets corrupted through Emu.
You can't see it, but I'm smiling ear to ear right now because you can imagine how well this flows into kind of the videos I want to talk about because uh after watching your videos I was very curious about where you place the revs in the original timeline, and that's something that like so you answered the question without even me asking it, was that is the Revolutionary Army a one-off in history? Is this the first like iteration of what seems to be a collective revolution? And prior, was it more natural? Was it just two sides? But you're saying it's just as nuanced as the current time, if not even more, a little bit more complicated, but not like not with more groups than we already have right now. It's just like a different nuance to those groups, right? And with the Revs, you're saying that the Revs might have been the one that came out on top the first time. Is that what I heard? Wait, Joe, but can you hear me?
Basically, yeah,
Okay, sorry, it
yeah,
cut out.
yeah. But basically, yeah, the Revs are the ones that won. Joyboy, I think, ended like Roger. Basically, he was never defeated. He turned himself in
Okay.
part because of what he saw became of his worship, right? They literally destroyed the freaking moons. There was global warfare surrounding him. It would be a perfect time to sort of dip out. I mean, at the same time, try and plant the seeds, such as the poneglyphs, of like, let's make sure that we don't forget this and problem solve it at some future. So Joyboy lost. The
Mm-hmm.
actual ancient kingdom, which had been corrupted and become evil and disassociated from Joyboy himself, even though the people weren't necessarily aware of that, was destroyed. Um, were also, I think, played an important role in all of this, and I think the pirates basically align themselves with this, like similar to what we see with Blackbeard right now. He wants to become a part of the world government. I think that he wants to use them as a tool to dominate the world. So along with that, the evil pirate is destroyed and you're left with the Revolutionary Army as basically by themselves.
Hmm. Hmm. That's interesting. Ooh, because that, I feel like as far as the Rev's roles in the Void Century, I don't think many people even have thought that far of like, huh, I wonder where Oda's gonna place them. But we have to remember that the Revs were introduced in Drum Island as well, alongside what you're saying, like the 20 doctors. Right at the towards the end of the arc is when we first get it that Vivi's dad was Cobra was bringing up at the previous reverie the news about Dragon, and so Oda had started bringing in Dragon in a strong fashion, honestly. After Logtown, it was Logtown, then Drum Kingdom, then we get a little bit more, I think, at the end of Alabasta, which was like the Revs were cooing Vera, I think, at the time, and then we found out Vera was someplace that Nolan had visited. And then I think like somewhere towards the end of the time skip is when Oda kind of pulled the gas off of Dragon a little bit, and that's when like the Summit War and that kind of stuff happened. Not that Dragon like increased or decreased in importance. It was just more so like the frequency and value to what we got of him decreased, and it more shifted to Luffy being the son of Dragon and Garp being the father of Dragon, quote unquote. And I think, yeah, Garp brought him up in Water 7 as well, and then there's a huge thing at Marineford. And now, we're at a part of the story that you've experienced the community, um, slandering Dragon's character left and right, up and down. And I know that we've talked about this, how you're a very strong defender of, or anti-slander of Dragon, which, I'll be transparent, just like Sabo is a noble and yet he's in the Revs. I am a Dragon supporter, but I definitely slandered him out the wazoo on streams and stuff like that. Not in the same scope of like, why didn't he like save Ginny and stuff like that? Not that kind of stuff. It was like other things that he was doing, like the weird decisions and weird like the weird places Oda put him in where it's so easy for him to do something else, but then he didn't. And I would harp on that. And that honestly is what spawned my recent videos on Dragon. I have 2 or 3 more videos coming out specifically on Dragon. And without going into my videos per se, I did want to get your scope of like, we hadn't talked about this part. A lot of people believe that Dragon was going to show up on Egghead. Given that Egghead has a huge, I would call it a cyclone that centralizes around the revs, and in that cyclone is the Kuma flashback, Bonnie's story, like Sabo stuff, the reverie. Like there's so many things that were spinning around, and honestly giving us whiplash as far as like, you know, when we got hit with Kuma's backstory, it was like, oh my god, this is his story. And then we hit the revs, the reverie, and then the rev story there, and we're like, oh, that's how it went down. Sabo was in the room with all of these yokai, and he like all this stuff, and the character that actually introduced us to the revs, which is King Cobra, he ended up dying, passing on some message to the revolutionaries, to Sabo. And you know, I think a lot of people fell flat on their feet because they wanted Dragon to show up. And I'm kind of curious where you were with that and are with it. Do you feel that Dragon is still going to show up on Egghead? Or do you feel that Dragon's role was just to be a central character? Do you think that the message was related to him? How do you feel about Dragon and Egghead in the past and going forward?
Yeah, so I did a video about this. It's a Vegapunk theory. It's got
Okay,
Vegapunk in the thumbnail. But I mean, Dragon is
I
such an
see it.
interesting character. I think partly I forgive Dragon a lot because of how I feel like I understand him, and I realize that just like we are not perfect, characters in the One Piece world aren't perfect, and Dragon is as culpable as anybody else. Partly, you know, and you brought this up in the video that I watched. It's just a fascinating concept of like the dichotomy between Luffy and his own father. Luffy almost selfishly frees people, right? He's the one that actively fights their enemies, and plays a very active role in that. Where Dragon basically inspires revolution so that they can fight for themselves. But in a sense, you know, Dragon's actions probably lead to more death than what Luffy has been doing throughout the story, just in the sense that, look, these are people that are less capable of fighting. We're trying to give them some of the tools to do it themselves, but I mean, it's a more brutal process. And in a sense, I kind of think that Dragon is a coward.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know if that's necessary. That might be too strong of a word. But it seems like he's less selfish, and he's trying to consider what everyone else wants more than Luffy. And I also think that this leads to some inaction. I think that Oda will dig into this more as we get further into Dragon. This has already been foreshadowed enough, in my opinion, or plenty, is that he's a pacifist. He is
Mm-hmm.
anti-war. Um, did I cut out?
Yeah, a little bit, but it was
Okay.
not as big as before.
Um, Yeah, so he's a pacifist. He's against war. So I feel like similar to Law, right? There's an interesting difference. Or Blackbeard, those characters are way different than Luffy because they meticulously plan everything that is happening because everything that happens is really important and they want to win. I think Dragon is very similar, where it's important that everything goes to plan. But a part of this is that he wants to minimize this global war. He wants to win quickly so that the world does not get destroyed, so that when he actually plays an active role in battle, it can be decisive. Um, so with Vegapunk, I think that Dragon and the Revolutionary Army will not show up to Egghead.
Okay.
I think that, and this was interesting that Vegapunk brought this up at the very beginning of the arc, is he told Dragon that I'm about to die, and now we know about the dead man switch. So that creates different connotations for the information that Vegapunk is revealing to Dragon. That potentially, if Dragon does know about the dead man switch, Vegapunk is essentially telling him, hey, I'm about to share the truth of the world, specifically the truth related to Ohara, which we saw in their flashback they both care about. Dragon directly promised that he was going to share what occurred there. That was his plan. So I'm sure that he's involved with that. There's also some interesting details here as well of like the first time that we see Vegapunk in Egghead, the Vegapunk Stella. He's warped himself halfway into the Iron Giant using like literal wormhole technology.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that before this even began, right, the first thing that we see of the Shaka is telling Dragon, "Hey, I'm about to die," and then Vegapunk has started playing around with his warping technology. I think that
Right.
he visited Dragon shortly after that in order
Mm-hmm.
to plant the seeds so that the message in Egghead right now, the Gorosei think that it comes from the Labosphere, the lab itself. I really, really doubt that that's the case. Without going
Hmm.
into a lot of details, like it just doesn't seem likely to me. Particularly since in the last chapter we saw Mars just like casually go in there, and we still have 6 minutes left. Like they could destroy the lab clearly before the message concludes, and I feel certain that we need this.
Hmm.
It's an inversion, talking about parallels again, inversions of O'Hara, which is that Clover was about to reveal the truth and then he got shot. Vegapunk gets shot and then reveals the truth. It's also related to like being able to act past the grave. You know, he's died, but his will remains,
Hmm.
sort of thing. You know, anyway, um, yeah, so I think that the Revolutionary Army is about to play their role, but they're going to play it from Kamabaka Kingdom, is my opinion. I've also seen theories that potentially they attack Mary Joie while all of this is going on. I'm not sure that that makes sense. I feel like if the Revolutionary Army were to be on the move, whether it's to Egghead or anywhere else, we would have already seen that being organized. But it
Right.
seems like they are tuned in. They are about to listen to the message. So I do think that they play a role, but it's just from Kamabaka Kingdom. And it would not surprise me if after Vegapunk's message concludes, we then like doom and we pan to the Revolutionary Army and Dragon and Sabo uh, sharing their truths about what they've learned, which includes the corruption of the government as well as the existence of Emu and its weapon.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely on board with the idea also that the message isn't on Labo Phase, and some way or fashion, it the Dragon is a part of that. I am curious because, as far as closing out Egghead, a lot of people put out different estimates, and I just stumbled upon another reason why Egghead's probably going to get extended a decent bit actually, and if not two chapters of an extension, maybe you combine all these things, because if we find out what Shaka told Dragon specifically, that's a whole different thing, and then we find out why Dragon didn't move. But then it's also interesting because when the video message goes up, it seems like a surprise to everybody, but we don't necessarily get Dragon's reaction, which is a tradition at this point. The ellipses, whenever we want some words from Dragon. But I found it interesting because, like, when you said you feel like Dragon has been a coward, and I say has been, um, you I'm assuming you don't mean about Egghead, right? Because now there's a different context. Like Vegapunk and Dragon are collaborating on what's happening at the current moment. So in this current moment, him not showing up isn't from that same, like, not exactly cowardice, but like that cowardice nature you were talking about earlier with Dragon, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, look, it's just straight up. Vegapunk told Dragon that he thought he was about to die. And
Mm-hmm.
then what did Dragon do? Nothing. He
Mm-hmm.
is not moved, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if Vegapunk had intended for Dragon to save him, I think that we would have gotten more from that at the very least of Vegapunk's frustration at Dragon's inability to act. But none of that seems to make sense to me, quite honestly. So I think it's more probable that yeah, this is all part of the plan. Everything that has occurred so far is part of Vegapunk himself's plan, and the Revolutionary Army have a part to play in that, just not here.
So, and then just shifting gears, but it's still obviously revolving around Dragon. You hadn't watched the first Dragon video, which is fine because like that one doesn't require, like, you'll be able to tap into what I'm talking about pretty quickly, I feel like. But would you say, and I saw some people, and I'm not saying you're the same people as the people on Twitter, but would you say when Fujitora on Dressrosa, right, the way he went about that uh arc was essentially he held himself back. He kind of admits that at the end of it, where he basically says, I had to let the pirates do this so that like certain things would line up, so that his agenda about the warlords would finally be in action in preparation for the reverie. But he had to gamble it because, a lot of lives and a lot of, there was a lot of trauma that came from his actions. Had Fujitora been in full-fledged power as an admiral on Dressrosa, he could have ended especially now that we know how powerful admirals like will be. There's no doubt in my mind that if he just like went full action mode, he could have stopped a lot of things from happening. um but he decided to take a step back and he let things happen. And he was, fortunate that Luffy ended up winning over Doflamingo and getting more powerful as a result of it, right? Would you look at that action as more of a cowardly action? Because a lot of people would say like Akainu's better off because he's more of a man of action. He does what he believes in and make sure he does it on his own, whereas Fujitora in that moment, why didn't he just take more action? And so like, would you view that as a cowardly kind of action or less so?
I mean, it depends on what the thought process is behind it.
Mm-hmm.
And Fujitora, so in no way do I think it's cowardly. I think it really comes down to how he understands the world. His, this is a whole conversation. I mean, you could probably do an analysis and a video on it by itself. But I get the impression that there's some things that the Marines and the admirals can't do. Um, like taking down the warlords, for instance. Like maybe the world needs to experience some of this danger in
Mm-hmm.
order to make changes, I guess. Does that make sense?
Yep.
It's
Yep.
like being having this pirate fight revealing this truth just shows you that things need to change.
Yeah.
And the Marines can't just solve all these problems by themselves, I guess.
And so can like um again, I know your stance on the dragon thing, but for me, when I look at Fujitora's character, and this is what a lot of what I went into in that first video was that it's very likely that that's the same logic that Dragon has, in that the world, the people need to experience why they need to be active, why they can't be backseat and waiting for a hero, waiting for someone else to change their circumstances. It's because the power comes from them, right? The hero, look at Luffy's situation. If the people weren't motivated, Onigashima, for example, if Luffy ran into that fight alone without the vigor of the samurais, his power, essentially from what Vegapunk told us, would be nullified because there was no belief behind him, right? So it's the world, the people behind him, that actually empowers the hero, and it's not the reverse. And I feel like that's a story that even applies to Luffy, and that's like the connector point, that like, yeah, like Luffy could be as strong as he is, but without the people backing, without the people believing that this change needs to happen, nothing would get done, right? If in that moment when he was taking, at least the anime did it a little bit more better, or I feel like they directed this scene better, where they had Luffy getting charred by Kaido, and then the Skyboat's wishes ended up being what got Luffy geared up into the final Bajran gun. And then we find out from Vegapunk, it's like it's the people's belief and desire for that freedom that powers him. And so I feel that when you look at when a character like Dragon, I feel like he understands that. And so when it's like when we finally get it, I'm sure a lot more people will understand. There'll always be the haters, but it's like there's certain instances, there's certain decisions like what Fujitora had to do. I look at it, I'm like, there was no other way. Crocodile was already an example of a warlord that was imprisoned because of what he did on Alabasta, and yet we still have a warlord system. And then it's like, okay, how can we get this? And then Fujitora has to put it on display, has to put it on blast in the news. Doflamingo was a warlord that was subjugating his people, and they were terrorized, and a pirate saved them, and he needed the world to see that in order to abolish the warlord system, albeit he probably didn't fully understand like the Seraphim aspect and the Vegapunk and the Gorosei aspect. But when it comes to Dragon, I feel like that's so much more the case. So, and in that line, what Vegapunk is doing is what Fujitora needed on Dressrosa. So what we get is Dragon as a character plus Vegapunk is doing what Fujitora had all in one at Dressrosa. And it kind of is crazy because then it feels like the real story of Dragon is that he was been like essentially gaslit his entire life, which is the case, the world's worst criminal. But like what we see, we don't get that vibe at all, right? Like, how is he the world's worst criminal? He hasn't even done anything, right? That's what we're seeing. And so like, even if we're trying to, be like, oh, he's the world's worst criminal, but we have to be objective and see like, no, it's Sabo doing it, it's Kuma doing it. It's if we look at the flashback, Kuma's the one running in all these different things, and yet he's the world's worst criminal. But then even from the less charitable side of it, it's like, bro hasn't done anything. Why do they call him this villain that he's not? But obviously eventually we'll see why. And I feel like it's like this masterminding thing like Fujitora, which is why I like this idea that the way I'm looking at the Navy is all the people that are not Akainu that have defect from the Navy are Dragon. And all the scopes of all the proteges that Garp had are our insight onto how Garp raised Dragon. So how he trained Ace and Luffy is what Dragon got. How he trained Kuzan is how he trained Dragon. How he trained Kobe and Helmeppo is how he trained Dragon. All of these things, but then also the defector, the way that Akainu refers to Fujitora, I see like, okay, there's this weird disdain for Dragon in the first place too. When we get to Marineford, he never well, not never, but he refers to Luffy as Dragon's son in this weird way that honestly, even people who aren't on that agenda still like, yeah, that was kind of interesting that he referred to Dragon like that. And so in that first video, I talk about Dragon as we'll never see him in a full, well, not never, that's a strong headcanon, but as far as like him being active in the world, it'll always be from a passive standpoint because Oda depicts all of the revolutionaries as the support characters. I don't know if do you play a lot of video games, Joyboy?
I play some. It depends.
So like you might be familiar with like RPG roles with support characters where they heal and all this stuff and like
Absolutely.
protect barriers and that kind of stuff.
Baldur's Gate.
Right. Okay. So and then so with when you look at the revs, you actually see that a lot of their characters, regardless of what powers they have, they're relegated to a support role. Bello Betty's the easiest one. She's an encouraging character that ends up buffing up the people, pumping them up, speed, power, whatever. Like we saw Moda on the Lucia Kingdom. The anime and the manga both showed her like beating up Peachbeard after the pump fruit. I'm like, what happened? They were getting destroyed, and then she shows up and she buffs them. But then you look at Lindbergh. Lindbergh has like a freeze ray, and instead of outright using it on people, well, he was using it on some people, but primarily what Lindbergh and Karasu were doing is they were disabling other characters. They're taking their weapons away or breaking chains, and they were like liberating people when they could have used their attacks to just take down Peachbeard and the pirates. They didn't do that. They supported the crowd. And then the one character, and this goes on, that's the reason why the first video is so long, is because I go really far in depth. You look at even Kuma. Kuma's very, very easily an offensive power, but yet he uses it for transportation or removing pain. And there's a few times where he uses it offensively, but it's like not his bread and butter as far as like, yeah, when he fought Zoro, he was throwing it out, but that's because he was doing a 1v1 against Zoro. And I'm not saying that these characters aren't capable of fighting, but then you look at a character like Sabo, where Sabo is the most offensive leaning character, yet when you look at what his planned role was at the Reverie, there was no offense there. He was meant to go get a key. He was meant to just destroy the like, not offensive, but more so like non-violent, like not attacking people. He destroyed the statue, he got the keys to free Kuma, and he destroyed the food, right? Whereas these other people were fighting the admirals, where it makes more sense. Hey, isn't Sabo your strongest dude? Why isn't he fighting? And it's because when you look at the revs, they're always in a support role. And so basically my point was, well, if we look at every single character underneath Dragon, and they're all support characters, and that's their mantra, to support the flames of the revolution, which are the people and not them. They're just fanning the flames, and Dragon has the wind power wherever it comes from, then he's probably the greatest support in that regard. He's probably the character that is the greatest fan to the greatest flame, which would end up being Sabo or Luffy or whatever it might be. And that's why I feel like Dragon, as far as the cowardice thing, it lines up with this pacifistic nature where, yeah, he's not going to be the one doing all this stuff, but he'll empower everybody to be able to fight their own fights. And that's kind of the role that I see Dragon. I'm curious about how you see that in line with Dragon's character, plus what you added about, the revs, the Void Century revolutionaries. Like, how does that fit in? Because you also, when we were segueing off of the Void Century stuff, you were like, I'm not saying Dragon is evil, I'm not saying Dragon's one way or the other, but you did say like it seemed like maybe the revs were the one who were the winning faction, or the powerful faction in the Void Century. How does that all relate to Dragon's character? Do you see him being this like support character, or do you think that he is good? He has this capacity to be like an emu or a Blackbeard or whatever, and he might actually tread on that line. Or do you think that Oda is gonna keep him in this support kind of side character that helps everybody else?
Yeah. So first off, I think that the Revolutionary Army is playing a support role
Mm-hmm.
that during the Reverie, but they have a plan for war. And Dragon has basically said that in the flashback with
Sabo.
Vegapunk.
Yeah.
Like he's forming an army, and the army will at some point be used.
Mm-hmm.
He's just very careful about that. He's laying schemes. I really like what you said before about um, Fujitora having seen what occurred in Alabasta with the defeated warlord, and then essentially the government gave credit for that to the Marines and to Smoker as if like, look, no, we're good. And so in a way, I see the Revolutionary Army as they're doing nothing. They're also laying traps that the government themselves can fall into to help substantiate what it is that they're doing. It's almost like Rayleigh says. In Sabaody, it's like, well, I can tell you the truth right now, but there's nothing much that you can do with it or about it. And I see that as being the same with the revolution that Dragon is intending on causing. He knows all of these truths, but he needs the people to sort of experience this adventure, horrific or not, in order to understand them and be able to utilize them. So yes, at some point in time, they're actually going to they're going to fight.
Mm-hmm.
I'm absolutely certain of it. It would be a very strange narrative decision for Oda to not do that, at the very least.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's this weird thing going on where the world is beginning to deify Sabo and not Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
Sabo obviously being the command, the second in command, which is just a weird. It's a weird relationship. I half wonder, what does Dragon himself think about this? Is he like jealous? Is this what he intended?
Mm-hmm.
What is going on here?
So I
And
actually
long story
talk
short,
about that in the first video where ironically, right, the reason why they're deifying Sabo in large part is the one violent action that he did, which he didn't do. They saw that he took down a king and they became enthralled by that to the point where we see Sabo's disdain for that title. And, you know, like I was saying, their entire all the planned stuff that the Revs go through is non-violent. They're not actively taking apart. It's the people. So it's ironic that they see them do this like we look at Lucia. Instead of killing the king, they have him in prison. They have him in prison to for whatever due process, right? But the one time they're associated to that violence is when they're being deified, right? And it's very, very interesting because we see that they actually don't want that. They don't like that. At least Sabo doesn't like that. And I apply that to Dragon as well. Because, you know, Dragon kind of says it's like, you know, it's unfortunate because he was one of the good kings, but you know, it's sparking the flames. And then Sabo goes like, anything for the flames of the revolution, right? So, which was a weird line
right?
in when we get Cobra's lines to Sabo, but yeah, like them revering Sabo in that way, I found it interesting because it was that violent action that sparked it. And I wonder if Oda's gonna do something about that, like use that plot point to be
Yeah.
like it like, because then you easily would fall into line. Of course they would love Luffy, the guy who punched Kaido through the island. Of course I'd love to see the oppressor get put into a volcano, right? Like that's what you'd want. But is that really the solution? Is that really the end goal of how we
Yeah.
solve the cycle, break the cycle, right? It's also
Yeah, well,
interesting.
we've talked about this throughout the video, right? But Oda takes inspiration from wherever he wants to, whatever interests him, whatever he sees. So when it comes to the Revolutionary Army, and I'm sure that this is related to the video that you've already made or will make in the future, is he's going to be inspired by actual world revolutions that have occurred, revolutionary leaders, etc. He's going to draw upon all the source material that he can. And so this applies to the revolution that's currently in the story. Look, if you look at Dragon and you really analyze everything about his character, he is anti-God. I think that he represents the D initial possibly more than anybody else.
Ooh.
Maybe that's reflected in the sense that D's, you know, that's what they say, D's bring a storm, and he's literally bringing a storm.
Uh-huh.
But D's are the enemy to gods. And I don't think that Dragon intends on becoming a god. And even further than this, it's said, I forget who exactly says this, but their objective is not to kill the kings of the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's truly about the gods or these celestial dragons. These are unintended casualties, and I think that largely Dragon wants to preserve the structure of the world as it is, which is why he does not directly fight them. Things like the Marines. But so here's the thing: if Dragon, like to bring this concept of Sabo being deified full circle, I think the best way to do this, my headcanon, is that through the course of the events in the story, Dragon dies. So he's like this perfect revolutionary leader, is how I want to see him in my mind. He is truly empathetic. He is truly thoughtful. He has considered everything to the best of his ability, but then he dies. Now Sabo is the leader of the Revolutionary Army. What does he do after that point in time? And so him being deified is really interesting, especially those comments. I can't quote them, but you brought up one of them of like everything for the flames of the revolution. At what point in time, what length would Sabo go to ensure that Dragon's will and the revolution continues and changes the world as Dragon initially sought? And so to tie this to your question about how I view the Revolutionary Army as it was during the Void Century, is I think that the perfect leader of the Revolutionary Army during that time was Emu's father, essentially a character very
Mm-hmm.
similar to Dragon, who died. This also works incredibly well in my mind because we know that Nefertari Lily was a member of the 20 Kings. And just based on context that we have so far, it's hard to rationalize this character as being evil, right? I want to see her as a character more of essentially like the world. I need to do something in order to protect my kingdom or protect the world, sort of thing. And so I don't think that this organization started off with the vision of what it ended up becoming. I think that they lost their leader, and then from this, you allow for somebody else to take over, and the decisions that end up determining what this organization ultimately becomes. And
Mm-hmm.
so, in the case of Sabo, Sabo needs, by the conclusion of the story, if the Revolutionary Army play a big role and ultimately win, he needs to reject the title of God, because what his forefathers did, what the Revolutionary Army of the past did, is that after they won, they became gods, a decision not all members agreed with, as we see with Nefertari Lily. But it's just an easy mistake to make. And combine this with the fact that, look, there's a lot of people that are joining the Revolutionary Army. A lot of kingdoms are joining the Revolutionary Army. Perhaps at some point this can be defined by 20 kingdoms who have the most influence. But these kings aren't necessarily making decisions for the betterment of the world. As we see in Lolosia, as just one example, they imprisoned their former king and they tried to create a new one. But there's a lot of resentment towards those that ruled before, the celestial dragons, the way of the world. And you could see this anger, if it is unresolved, lead to something like we see with Emu and the Gorosei, and the world government as it's been portrayed throughout the story, of essentially like they made the wrong decisions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's so. I agree on the dragon dying part, and then you added a lot of weight to it, and I think like there's it's so hard to convince someone who doesn't see it that way, because I feel like, yeah, I see dragon dying by the end of story. It fits a really well, but I'm curious if you thought to who you would like for dragon to die at the hands of in the
Yeah,
modern
I mean
times.
that's a tough question. I think that if Emu for it leads to Blackbeard or Luffy, or then the Revolutionary Army makes the most sense, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that could be something that Oda uses to hype Emu up, is the defeat of Dragon. It could also be God's Knights. It really just depends on how strong that faction is and what Oda wants to do there. I can't 100% say, but something related to the world government directly would be the most fitting way for Dragon to have his sort of built over the story climactic fight, in which I think he will lose.
I guess another question too would be, um, what tier do you put Dragon on the same tier of importance as Shanks, or like or is he like a big mom kind of character? Like what kind of character do you think Dragon is most, like, as far as importance to the story and for going on with the story? Where would you place Dragon?
I'd put him right up there with Shanks. There's things that I'm certain that the Revolutionary, which will be vital to
Mm-hmm.
how the story shapes at the end. Things like the reveal of the Gorosei, or sorry, of Emu, their existence, their weapon, the ties between the government and the underworld and the piracy, their corruption. This is their role in the story, is
Mm-hmm.
to reveal these truths. And I think that these truths, once revealed potentially here in Egghead, or related to Egghead on Kamabaka Kingdom, will effectively destroy the world. It will be broken into pieces, with things like the Marines potentially saying enough's enough. Like Akainu, as the fleet admiral, for instance, all he cares about in the entire story is the reputation and perception of the Marines. So if all of this comes out in a convincing way of what the government truly is, what they have been doing, I don't think that he's going to stand for that. So anyway, the world fractures, right? And at the same time it fractures, you have individual groups that are setting out to become this new king of the world. So you have perhaps context for a great battle in Lodestar or in Laughtale, or in Mary Joie itself. Of everybody trying to claim the prize, which is now available,
Mm-hmm.
uh, where the world, basically is like who should we believe in? What should we believe in, if not ourselves? So, yeah, I mean, but the Revolutionary Army will spark a lot of this. And even at the end of the story, I think that the Revolutionary Army has a part to play, even after Dragon himself might be defeated, like Sabo. I don't think that Sabo dies, as an example. And he'll carry on that will, and that will be important as well. I would put this on the level of Shanks,
Okay.
personally.
Okay.
Shanks is kind of orchestrating Luffy's journey to at least some extent.
Yeah.
He seems so the Revolutionary Army is orchestrating this journey to an equal extent.
So, really quick tangent, and then we'll get back. You don't partake in this part of the community too often, so I thought it'd be interesting. I think a lot of people feel that Shanks is one of the strongest, if not the strongest character in the series. Do you feel that Dragon could show out to be just as strong, if not stronger, by the like end of the series? We see like a portrayal where like they're maybe equals. Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, so I think that Shanks is the strongest period, for
Okay.
most of the story. That will change with the rise of Luffy and Blackbeard, but that's
Uh-huh.
just what I think, is that Shanks is strongest. That being said, I think that it's totally within Oda's wheelhouse to bring Dragon up to that same level. I did a bounty video recently that I thought was kind of fun, of like, hey, what are the bounties going to be post Egghead? Um,
Uh-huh.
but it's just it's a cool idea in my head for Luffy to essentially get his Gomu Gomu bounty, 5.6 billion, at the conclusion of Egghead, given everything that we know, all of his accumulated feats, being a Yonko, being literally the world's greatest threat. Like there's I know that Dragon was the greatest criminal, but at this point in time, we know who Nika is. The government does, Emu
Yeah.
does. They know the importance of that, right? So it's like at this point, I think Luffy should be on that same level. And Roger had a bounty of 5.5 billion. So there you have uh, it's in my opinion, it's always been clear that Oda intends to use that, and it could just be as soon as Egghead. But at the same time, right? Luffy hasn't won yet, and so he needs rivals or he needs contemporaries. And so bounties are not a reflection of strength, but they are used to sort of convey these points. And so I see Shanks and Dragon's bounties being very similar to that, somewhere in the 5.5 range, with Blackbeard being a little bit below that, maybe like 5 billion, a little bit below Whitebeard, maybe 4.9, just because he's still a little bit low key in the story. But yeah, I mean, so with that being established, like bounties aren't a direct reference to
Mm-hmm.
strength. However, there it's some things just narratively I think are necessary, and I think building up Dragon to the point of equaling somebody like Shanks and being the Revolutionary Army themselves, being one of the great factions which fights for control, or whatever, at the end. And yeah, Dragon could absolutely end up being of the same level. And we just haven't seen him fight. So like Oda, the world is open. It's blank. Oda can do essentially what he wants to, and it would seem like a weird decision, not impossible, but a weird decision for Oda to uh, leave us underwhelmed with Dragon when he finally makes an appearance after 1,000 chapters.
Maybe after 1100 1200 chapters, maybe even, who knows at this point. um
Right, yeah.
I always found it interesting with Dragon too, because like as far as stage characters, Blackbeard seems to, like, because Drum Island was where Dragon and Blackbeard were technically both introduced. Blackbeard was there prior, Ace was there, and Ace was chasing Blackbeard. Blackbeard was there, and then right after that news, or just before actually, I think Dragon was introduced in the flashback. So it's like right in line, and then I always found it interesting, but it's like uh Jesus Burgess goes when after Dressrosa, he's like, nobody knew about where this was. It's where you'll find Dragon and that hateful Sabo. I found the headquarters of the Revolutionary Army. And it's like he calls Sabo hateful, and I'm assuming it's because he just lost to him and he fought to him. But like hateful is kind of like excessive, given that like they fight people daily. Like, does he, maybe he says this about Marco, maybe he says this about like every single person he fought and lost to. I don't know. But it is interesting that Oda made it that the Blackbeard pirates went and destroyed the Dragon's revolutionary headquarters for possibly over 20 years. This was his place. And then we also find out that that the exact establishment that Dragon is trying to dismantle is, at least from what we can tell at the moment, is what Blackbeard wants to be a part of, and is planning a way into that, depending on how he ends up getting there, if he's truthful or not, which obviously is Blackbeard. But it is interesting that Oda is creating this like kind of collision course for these two characters, and I just feel like it's weird if it, like, Blackbeard ends up killing Dragon that way. I feel like a lot of climaxes would have to happen for it to be like even more meaningful. But could you see a world where it's Blackbeard being like the person that takes down Dragon, and at like what point in the story would that be if it was that case?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that's interesting as well. I mean, Blackbeard has already attacked Baltigo, so that was clearly something that he saw as being possibly advantageous. Um, could this possibly end up happening concurrent with Elbaf, and essentially before all hell breaks loose and there's like this global intricate warfare? Um, I don't know. I would have difficulty wrapping my mind around that. But Oda does things commonly that I couldn't see, but clearly he could see. So yeah, I'm not totally ruling it out. But yeah, I mean, it would be hype for Blackbeard to sort of accumulate these feats. I personally think that he takes down Shanks. So if it's then Dragon, then Shanks, and then with a confrontation in Luffy, like hype levels would be through the roof
Insane.
at that point in time for
Yeah.
him. Uh,
So
I wouldn't
so
rule it out. I don't believe it. Is basically my opinion.
I did want to start like winding down, and we'll get the super chats. But with this, you also had a Blackbeard video, which I watched most of it, but it was like 2 weeks ago when I'd watched it. So just like really quickly with the Blackbeard video, you had the idea that, or do you want to just give like the quick summary of that video? And then 3 Day, or if they have mods, could you share the link as well to this old video,
Yeah.
older video?
So So I think the most important thing to understand from that video is that Blackbeard takes current events and he manipulates them to his advantage in ways that are creative, that a lot of people wouldn't predict. But if you boil it down to its simplest form, Blackbeard uses other characters or other factions' desires against them, and the faction which he commonly uses repetitively throughout the story is the world government. It's like Blackbeard understands the nature of the world government and how specifically to use them to better himself, whether it's
Mhm.
becoming a Shichibukai, actually as a Yonko, knowing that the world government is going to come to his aid if there's a Yonko war, basically, and he's maybe not yet ready for a battle with Kaido or for Big Mom, right? He can sort of establish himself, get called a Yonko, then it's like the government is going to protect me. And there's many ways that he potentially uses the government. But I think a big concept that I've been thinking about post Egghead is the balance of powers. This is literally something that the Gorosei bring up practically every time that we have seen them throughout the story. for 1,000 chapters is the balance of powers. That's what they're thinking about constantly. Of like, how does this affect the balance of powers? We need a new Shichibukai. The Shichibukai are gone. We need something to replace them. Yada yada yada. And so, following Egghead, now this is a problem. Because they've lost the Pacifista. I personally think that they might lose the Seraphim because
Mhm.
Katarina Devon has touched Saturn. This might directly relate to the authority chip, meaning that the Gorsei, haven't yet actually had an opportunity of talking to the Seraphim yet, as far as I'm aware. I might have misremembered that, but anyway, we're moving on.
Mhm.
Um, and will order them to basically be subservient to Blackbeard. So you lose the Seraphim, you lose the Pacifista. If the Revolutionary Army play a role in this arc and start to reveal the truths of the world, right? You have rebellion everywhere, possibly including the Marines. You might lose the Marines. You might gain things as well, potentially, like Emu and the Gorosei and the Gods Knights are now active combatants. You have their weapons, so there's some balancing occurring there. But ultimately, I think that how it gets balanced at the conclusion of Egghead will be a point of emphasis. At some point in time, Oda will need to address this and how the Gorosei and how Emu have considered this. And so the balance of powers to not be equal and they need greater strength, then it's interesting to think about how they might do that. This leads to interesting theories such as breaking a character like Doflamingo out of Impel Down to become your sort of new warlords. Well, the warlords don't need to be abolished anymore if the entire world is basically declared the world government its enemy, and we no longer are not evil because the people are aware of it now. Like we are literally demons. So at this point, harboring somebody of Doflamingo's nature, it doesn't matter. You can then Flamingo what he wanted all along of like now you can be a celestial dragon. We can offer that to you if you serve our purposes. But specifically relating to Blackbeard, Blackbeard should notice that the balance of powers is out of whack and that the government now possesses a desire which he can exploit. He can offer his services to them. Basically, a pirate alliance. I think really you should think about the world government as basically lawful pirates, right?
Mhm.
They're pirates that have become kings of the world and determined law itself. But when the world breaks, I think that this will be even more obvious. And so you'll have something like ultimately, this is a story about pirates. You'll have a pirate alliance between Blackbeard and the government. They'll have something that he feels like he can utilize, and he has something that they'll utilize. Will they betray each other? Yes, that's what happens with pirate alliances. We're told that specifically, but it's about playing the game. And I think that Blackbeard and Emu might be scheming each other. And, talking about Blackbeard, right, like through Caribou, he's going to learn about the ancient weapons
Mhm.
um, and their locations, their identities. And so things like, for instance, Uranus, I think might be the weapon that Emu possesses. If I said that before, that's a headcanon. My apologies, but like I assume that the weapon is Uranus. So this could lead to Blackbeard essentially acquiring all three ancient weapons. Is this connection with the government? You could also think about it in a different way of like, look, if Blackbeard just goes and takes Shirahoshi, then the world government is and Emu probably knows what Shirahoshi is. They're going to
Mhm.
see that move and be able to discern it. And so Blackbeard might need to be careful still, even though we're closer to the end of the story about what exactly he reveals, the information about himself and his objectives to the world government in return. So an alliance with the government then gives him a different kind of protection of like, hey, we're now anti-Luffy. These islands are subservient to Luffy. They worship Nika. We need to punish him. Ah, Blackbeard, I can do that. Go to Fishman Island, fulfill the prophecy of
The Bond
Charlie's
stuff.
prophecy
Yeah.
With
Okay. Yeah.
Luffy having destroyed Fishman Island, where Katarina Devon can potentially transform into Luffy, that sort of thing that plays out. But at the same time, he can get the ancient weapon Poseidon in a more low key way. Especially if someone like Caribou is on the crew, like ooh, suddenly we finished that plot line of Shirahoshi's just living inside of Caribou. And yeah, I feel like I'm going off on a tangent here, but yeah, that's basically the idea is that he can utilize the world government. That's the Blackbeard way of
Yeah.
thinking about the story right now.
No, yeah, and like when you came out that video, I was guys go check out the video because some of you guys might remember I pitched a I guess like a short form version of this to Brago and Cole on stream. We did like a collab stream, and everybody's like, ew, ew. And I was just like, wait, no, it makes sense. Like if Blackbeard is collecting the things, maybe the Marines end up using him as an asset. And that's kind of like, that's what privateers essentially were back in the day. Where some of them were Navy men. So like Kuzan even being there, sometimes in like actual pirate history, it was a Navy, like under the Spanish Armada or the whatever, British Armada, whatever. They would have like a Navy man end up defecting or leaving because the pay was cut or something, and then they become a notable pirate, and then they would be hired as a privateer, rather than be in like underneath the Navy. They were a pirate that ended up becoming paid by the taxes anyways because they were so good at what they did. And I'm like, that seems like what Blackbeard could be setting up for, given that he's like he's lining up all the cards to join as a king. But then the reason why that came to my mind was because like we're at a place where like Fujitora is kind of like a weird admiral. He's not fully on board, and there's like reprimands in place because of the Reverie and Dressrosa. And then we have at the time when I was thinking about it, Kizaru. There's a huge discussion: is if does he defect on Egghead, and maybe he doesn't stay fully on board by the end of the story as well. And that's when it becomes interesting because Blackbeard's epithet, some people like it gets translated as Commodore, but also Admiral. He gets called as Admiral Blackbeard of his own thing. They even, I think they corrected him in that same chapter of saying like he's Commodore, but it's also, I forgot who told me it was also Admiral. And I'm like, huh, wouldn't that be interesting if he just became admiral in the Navy, like a dark admiral, because he's that level of power and he has his own fleet and he has an ex-admiral, so it could make a lot of sense. But then if we were to tie back our previous conversation, which just real quick, shout outs to Randy Choi showing up saying some immense hockey over here, appreciate you. But tying in a reason why Blackbeard could end up becoming joining the Marines is maybe he does take Dragon's Head, taking the world's worst criminal, like, and giving him to the government. That's like a huge card. Like, hey, maybe we should make this guy a part of us. That he just did the thing that we've been trying to do for like 20 years. So it's like, hey, that there's so much more to this idea about Blackbeard ending up onto the Marine side, that it's just so interesting, because I feel like if you said that out of context without all of the things that you were just saying, and you kind of gaslit, you're like, I feel like I'm rambling, but like, no, you need that, all these connections, because if you just said that out loud, if you just tweeted like, hey, I think Blackbeard's going to join the Navy, you would be slandered to the end of the earth, right? But then when you really look at the situation, the balancing of the world, and the loss of the Yonko, but the appearance of Nika, and then it feels like maybe there's a reason, like, hey, can we fight Shanks, Blackbeard, Luffy? Hey, what if we took one of them away? And oh, let's not forget Crossguild, that's combining all the warlords together, right? So, and then if you look at that in the Seraphims, you said like maybe the Seraphims don't make it out of Egghead. Even if they do, you have an entire faction of Yonko that is essentially the counterparts to the warlords that you're so afraid of. And then you add Boa, which you basically failed to get every single warlord. And well, we don't know where Moria is, but Moria would probably be on Blackbeard's wheelhouse at the I don't know how things are gonna slate out, but feels like Moria is gonna end up in some capacity underneath Blackbeard. So I do really like the idea that Blackbeard ends up as like a dark admiral on the Navy side, just because his name
Yeah.
and like all that stuff. It'd be crazy, but then that would
Well,
also motivate the other admirals to be like, am I really just going to take orders and be next to Blackbeard? Are we really justice still? And that's where like Sword gets like super activated. Like, hey, we have Blackbeard in our same ranks. Are we still operating this like under the guise of the Navy, or should we be more active? Should we be more like the Revs? Because in a lot of ways it feels like Sword and the Revs are more aligned than Sword and Navy, right? So it's kind of interesting how things can end up shaking out when we
yeah.
leave
Well,
Egghead.
well, this is what Oda does though throughout the story is he takes things that he's used before and then develops them further. You know, like with the Shichibukai, for instance, that's an idea of pirates joining the world government. Well, why can't he escalate that? Why
Hmm.
can't we make Blackbeard the first Yonko Shichibukai? Does it have to necessarily be labeled as a Marine Admiral? It might not. But regardless, it represents this new concept, which is derivative of things that we've actually already seen in the story. And all of this is basically built upon one simple idea, which is that following the reveal of the of Vegapunk and the Revolutionary Army, whenever, however that happens, the government doesn't need to hide their evil anymore. They don't need to pretend, right? So then taking an obviously, highlighted famous, infamous criminal, and then making him a part of your forces, it doesn't matter. They can do that if they feel like they need to. And
Hmm.
honestly, this could be another, like talking about possible parallels in the story, go back to Wano, right? Orochi and Kaido together. Orochi is the king, right, of the world of Wano. He is Imu, basically, or the Gorosei combined. And what happens is he has an alliance with Kaido in order to help substantiate his rule and subjugate the people. And so why can't Oda do that with the government? I think that a lot of people, think, well, maybe the government is strong enough on its own, but like, why wouldn't they just want to win more,
Yeah.
right? If they can with Blackbeard in order to defeat someone like Luffy, Nika, Shanks, all of these other enemies, so that they're left with, they know that Blackbeard will eventually become an enemy himself, but you can take out the real threat, which is all of these people coming together in this giant pirate world, uh, led by Luffy, right? That's probably what they would be inspired to do.
Yeah.
So all of
And
this makes a lot of sense to me.
even with Blackbeard's introduction, a lot of people still wonder why was Blackbeard even on Drum Island. And at the end of my Blackbeard video, I talk about how when you look at, like, let's not wonder why he was there, but let's look at the result of the situation. The result is, well, if you wanted devil fruits, there were three very apparent ones: Dalton, Chopper. You can't explain to me that, yeah, Wapol was successfully able to escape Blackbeard of all characters who instigated everything. He couldn't chase Wapol off the island. So three devil fruits all there, and none were taken. But what ended up happening, and the people said this at the end of or actually no, this is like half at the beginning, mostly at the beginning, when I think it was said to Vivi that Blackbeard came and liberated them. They were oppressed under Wapol, and then they said it was a blessing that Wapol left, and they're just so grateful that they're rebuilding. And so when you look at this situation, Blackbeard at Drum Island did the job of the Marines. He pushed out and turned what the king was essentially acting like a pirate and ended up becoming what he should have been the entire time, which was a pirate, which, if people might not remember, but Wapol faked becoming a pirate. Like, he said something along like, why would I become a pirate? That's so dumb or something. And then Luffy goes like, how dare you for slandering this thing? And so like Wapol was half seas on everything, being king, being a pirate, whatever. And so Blackbeard ended up going to Drum Island and liberating them, to the point where the citizens were just grateful. They were just grateful that he did that. And that would be essentially what he would be doing as an admiral. It would be kind of like, yeah, no one looks at what Akainu did at Ohara and is like, wow, what a great guy. But at the end of the day, he's still the fleet admiral and there's no mutiny. Everyone's like, yeah, that's the guy who protects us, right? So you can have this person who actually just slaughters people and is still the person there because they get the result of the peace and freedom that ends up, creating the illusion of prosperity and peace that people want to subscribe to in the long run, but they don't necessarily have the power to change the status quo, like that in Dressrosa, right? Where it's like all these people are turning to dolls and they don't know what to do. And the Tontadas and people are trying to create this plan, but they didn't have the firepower to really enact it until Luffy came, right? And so on the flip side, Blackbeard would be the current firepower. Well, it's like, hey, Blackbeard, technically, another way that Blackbeard was ran in line with the Revs was actually Leloucia, right? Peachbeard was underneath Blackbeard. And so there's another instance of like, hey, look at how these nations are running. And it's like the Revs are liberating, and then there's Blackbeard, and then they keep on coinciding. And so I feel like, and then Blackbeard, Dragon left the Navy, and so Blackbeard joining the Navy afterwards to enact his justice or bring his justice could be like another dark parallel. I just like Blackbeard's character and how he brings darkness to the story, which ended up
That
titling the this stream "Seeing Through the Darkness," which I think we ended up cutting through a lot of subjects, which is like the void century, really like your nuance of like the planets and all that, because I look at a lot of the different points and I went a different direction, but ultimately there's so many connection points to even the spread out ideas that we had. Um, and if there's any other points you had on Blackbeard, if there were, let me know. But I'm gonna go touch on some of these super chats, and then we can start looking to close out the stream.
Yeah, I guess I'll just leave with this is that the video combines what he might do and aligns with the government with the concept that Blackbeard's plan all along has been to become Joyboy. However, you want to make sense of that, and how I piece that together. But like you said, how he freed Drum Island, he is the evil Joyboy, and I think that that will become a part of the story in the future, and really bring home Blackbeard's role in the story.
Yeah, yeah, it's gonna be, man, because you look at that. That was Drum Island. We talked about this earlier. Like, how early did Oda cook these things? And literally, Drum Island was Dragon, Blackbeard, Luffy, and the dichotomy of like how they're portrayed in terms of liberation. And
Yeah.
one's a Revolutionary Army guy, one's a gummy kid that just is just climbing a mountain for his friends, and the other one just came and left the place better off, actually. So who
Yeah.
knows?
I had a whole video on Drum Island, but it's like really interesting that the Drum Island, the drums of liberation are literally frozen. In Drum Island, you have on top of one of the tallest mountains, the kingdom, Mary Joie, basically. It eventually gets captured by pirates, and we connect all of this to the Void Century in that theory. I think that there is a lot of food for speculation there.
Yeah, yeah. Even the height difference, like the way I have a video on Drum Island, but it's like, it's not. It's so goofy. It actually, Drum Island. I have a video at the end of this break month about what the One Piece is, and it ties back to Drum Island so many times over that I'm like, this is just funny. It's just funny that like Oda Oda was cooking. Oda was cooking with some, as Hidden Island said, some grade A1 ingredients, which, nah, I won't spoil this idea. But actually, no, I'll say it. He said something at the end of his super chat. He said Oda's got a Michelin star. I was laughing. This is a joke from me and Sai's podcast. We were saying that one of the Holy Knights might be like a Michelle, and she might be a cook that Sanji has to beat. And then later on, I was like, wait, she's gonna be the Michelin star, which would be like, how like the Gorosei have stars names in there. So she would
Yeah.
be the Michelin star, and that would allow Sanji to fight. They would have like a cook off, which allow him to fight a lady, but she'd also be like a holy knight. And it was off of the Yon cooks, that she was one of the Yon cooks, that like she's like the leader or something like that. And then I was like, oh my god, it's called a Michelin star. This is perfect. The holy knight, god knight Michelin star, and her name's Michelle.
Bro,
Yeah. Yeah.
godly levels of cooking, literally.
Yeah, I actually have a more full video of like the funny connection points, because okay, just before super chats, the reason why we got there was because Sanji fought a person named Oven. So we were like, oh man, what if the God Knights is a microwave? And then we're like, Mike, oh, it's gonna be Chef Mike. And then I was like, wait, no, it's gonna be a girl, Chef Michelle, and Mike's in the name. And then I landed on the Michelin star, and then I was like sold. And that was like the brief how we got through it, but there was more to the in-betweens. But I just love that it went from Mike, oh no, it has to be girl, Michelle, oh no, Michelin star, perfect, we got it, we're cooking. Oh man. But we had Vasil Vlad, Ivan Ivanovici. Wow, that's a sick name. Vasil Vlad Ivanovici with the 10 euros said, Hancock and Jinbei, slave and fishman, inheritors of Fisher Tiger's will, defeat Figarland, the proudest celestial, in a humiliating manner, naked with his hair resembling a jester hat, the world's laughing stock. So you just put an entire theory in headcanon into one super chat. And I'm just going to throw this over to you, Joyboy. How would you like it if Garland Garling is just naked with his hair resembling a jester hat, defeated by Hancock and Jinbei? Do you see that happening, and how do you feel about it?
I am for it, but is it going to happen? No. I No.
Dude, have
That's
you
hilarious though.
the SBS where Oda just like, what would his hair be if he didn't cut it or whatever, and it's just like connected. You saw that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a fun one. That was listen, the Jester hat. I'm for Hancock and Jinbei taking down Garland, sure, but I also feel like maybe like Shanks can take down his grandpapa. You know what I mean? Like we don't know if he's dad or grandfather, but Shanks and Mihawk
I just
could be them. Could be them.
I, I just feel like God's Knight will play a more important role than being defeated by Jinbei, especially the leader of the God's Knight by Jinbei and Boa Hancock.
Huh.
But headcanon has led us astray before. It might do so again.
Yeah, yeah. It'll be interesting to see what comes up. But I did like, as far as Vlad, if you want to, I don't know which name you want me to call you by, but I like the name Vlad. So Vlad, if you want to make this into a video, definitely make the thumbnail Garland naked with his hair resembling a jester hat. That's gonna get clicks. I like that. We got Hidden Island with the $20 super chat. Shout it out a few times. Appreciate you. And then also Dax Sake was in here earlier. Randy Choi came in. Kev Dog. Shouts out all the creators hopping in. Appreciate you all. Alejandro Solis with the $2 says, love to my number 3 and 5 both having Megamind. Are you saying so I'm number 5 and Joyboy is number 3 as your favorite creators and we both have Megaminds? Yeah. Is that where we're getting at with this? Because I'll take 5, but I feel like it's a little disrespectful to my guest to call him number 3. He might be 1 or 2. Come on. Can you get more respect for Joyboy here? Let me see where the chat's at right now. Ooh, dog ad, cool. Thank you, YouTube. Let's see. Oh, Alejandro says, "Let my boy cook." Wait, which one? Are we 5 or wait? You said well. Well, what? What are you? Am I? You have to. You can't be vague. You have to say who's.
You can't be power scaling YouTubers on a YouTuber stream. That's not cool.
Yeah, or you gotta be stand out with your agenda. I've been seeing Twitter heads rank the YouTubers. I'm not in any of those lists on Twitter, which I think is a good thing because I'm like, you know what? I'm staying away from the brain rot. Yo, baby Pluto said I'm outside the top 30. You know what? Fair. I'll take it. It's fine. There's a lot of YouTubers in the One Piece space. Let's see. Mr. Bushido with the 21 months vision. I feel like you just hacked the system. Weren't we at 17 months or something? Did we really hit 21 months? That's wild. Anyways, I appreciate you. You said, will we see Beast Pirates in the cover story? The Beast Pirates? Yeah, probably, right? Because we just got the Wano stuff. I feel, and it's a series now, right? I think it's like the Yamato's Stroll or something like that. I forgot what it's specifically called.
Well, also, but it's kind of confusing as well because Green Bull might have like literally killed the members of the Beast Pirates that we actually care about.
People don't die. Like, Joyboy, come on. No,
I mean, you know, maybe Oda just hated them. You know, it's like one was too long. End.
Nah, dude, I would love it if he did kill them, and then people are like, "What happened, Oda? I thought you don't kill anybody." He's like, "Nah, I just hated them." Like he didn't.
He went through all of Wano. After 100 chapters, he's like, "Nah, Kaido ends up in the lava. That's how we're gonna finish this. I don't care."
Yeah. Like Kaido. Okay, wait. That's a subject. Big Mom Kaido. You think that they're dead at this point? I've seen a lot of people take a U-turn at this point and be like, what they originally were like, oh, they're probably alive, but now they're like, nah, they're dead. Where are you at with that? Kaido and Big Mom specifically.
I will die on this hill. If Big Mom is dead, I will be sad, very sad.
Sad
so
boy.
I hope that's not the case. Yeah, sad boy theories.
You change if Big Mom dies, like we get it confirmed on your Twitter handle, it'll be sad boy theories.
Sad boy theories. No, like everyone in Whole Cake Island hated Big Mom, but Big Mom was my favorite freaking character. I loved how interesting she was and how it just didn't make too much sense. And she's this overpowered child. She's hilarious. But there's like this dynamic with her family, which I wanted to be resolved. Of she kills members, but they're not actually dead. She might not actually be in her own mind, and I just wanted that resolved. I felt like that was important, not just for Big Mom,
Uh-huh.
but for characters like Katakuri or characters like Pudding. And so I always envisioned a bigger role for Big Mom in the story. Like the big thing in the past was Big Mom for Ally. That was something I spearheaded, and I died on the hill. But
Big
yeah, I
Mom
thought that that would
for
become something
Nakamas.
for Ally. That was like
Okay. No,
not
not
Nakama, but
Nakama.
like
Okay, okay, sorry, sorry.
Pirate Alliance.
Alliance.
Yeah,
Okay.
I still, honestly, I haven't given up on the theory yet because Katakuri is still here, so I have hope.
Yeah.
But
No, I could
yeah,
see
I
Ally.
imagine.
I have a video that talks about that too. That like Big Mom is dead, but Charlotte Linlin is gonna come back. So
Yeah, yeah, or I think about this often in terms of Howl's Moving Castle, the Witch of the Waste.
mm,
How she was this antagonistic villain at the beginning of the series, and then basically by the end of it, she's like this senile old lady who's kind of cute, and it's just like, hey, I'll travel with you guys, and it's kind of a nuisance, but in a really wholesome way. Anyway, long story short is, I really hope that Big Mom comes back. If she just died. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. However, I would say that I think Kaido is dead. That's
dead,
so
dead.
that's my belief.
Not dead, dead.
Dead, dead.
Kaido? No,
Yeah,
say it ain't
Kaido.
so. So does that mean that you?
The lava defeated him.
Oh, you said it on your own. I didn't even prompt Joyboy. You can't defend yourself if, like, at least you could say that. Oh, ParVision led me down this, like, insinuating question line. No, you said it on your own. Kaido, Big Mom's more durable than
Defeated
Kaido.
by
Uh oh.
yeah lava.
Uh
Yeah.
oh.
No. My headcanon is there was like this lava bubble that like forced Big Mom to the surface through a crack, and then she ended up in the ocean and she floated up to the sea, and now she's sea now.
Okay.
Kaido
Okay.
died.
Uh oh. Uh oh.
Yeah, he
Hey
was trapped.
guys,
Yeah.
I didn't say it. He did. Woo, that's crazy. Listen, at least you're not giving a Kainu all the numbers, right? Because that's the flip side. People want to give a Kaido a Kainu 3, a Magma 3, Yonko 0, was like, Whitebeard Ace, whatever that combines, and then Big Mom and Kaido. So at least you're keeping Big Mom away from the Magma victim list. Yeah, it's interesting with the Beast Pirates because like the way I see them is that they're probably just like not okay, not the same thing as when Kizaru answered like, "Hey, I'm a corporate slave," but it was like right like Saint Saturn was like listening and was like right there. It's like obviously he's gonna say he's a corporate slave right in front of his boss, right? I look at the Beast Pirates a lot of like that where they're just like random dudes that were hired, and yeah, they're in a bad system and they're not good people, but like it Kaido would just kill you or eat you. Like you didn't really have an option once you were there, right? Like maybe their scouting program was really crazy, and you're like, wow, do you want a life where you don't have to worry about food and your family can all eat? And then you get to Wano, and you're like, oh, this isn't what I signed up for. But then like you look at the edge of Wano, and you're like, I can't swim or sail a boat off of here, so like I guess I'm just stuck. And then
In for the win.
you go to your boss like, hey, could I put my 2 weeks notice? And Kaido's like, what's a 2 weeks notice? And then he just eats you. Like, I don't know. Like you can't. So like, and then like Yamato could kind of understand that and be like, I know you're not terrible people, right? Because they all listen to Yamato at the end of it. She kind of just like, hey, stop that. And they're like, okay, Yamato, I'm not gonna do bad things anymore. And then we get a time skip where they're just sitting in Udon. We don't know how they all congregated there, but I'd imagine Yamato's like, you're in timeout, go over there. And like, I don't know what King in Queen's role is, but if they're straight dead from Green Bull, that'd be crazy. But I would imagine that maybe he captured them, but like I don't see how he left the fight with the scabbards and like with Shanks and then took them captive because he came alone. So there's all this nuance that I do hope that we do get more information via the cover story. But as far as Oda hating them and so they're just dead, I don't know. But
Yeah. Hold on. I have one last thought here.
yeah.
Let me explain myself at least somewhat, right? So, like, and this is, I think, important in the story of One Piece. Characters' wills matter. Like,
Mhm.
they're actively trying to fight for something, and that makes them stronger. This is especially true with Big Mom. There is a big difference between Big Mom and Kaido at the conclusion of Wano. I think you can reasonably argue that Kaido is kind of his objective in life has been completed. He seems to be waiting for this moment that Joyboy
Hmm.
appeared and defeated him, and he did. And I see this as sort of fulfilling him in a way which sapped his will, in a way which sapped his strength. Whereas Big Mom is defeated in a very different way. The last thing that she says is that "Don't think me defeated," right?
Yeah.
So that's
She's
some of the
looking
headcanon
at the
behind why.
magma and says, "I'm not gonna die. This isn't going to kill me." And that's crazy energy if she dies. You know what I mean? Like that's
Right? Yeah. What a way to go out.
yeah, like
Don't think me dead. Proceeds to die.
yeah, because like in the manga, we just see like she's looking at like a white fuzzy thing. That's the magma, and she's looking at it. And I don't know if there's a character more delusional in fiction that looks at magma, says I'm not gonna die, and then just dies. Like that's so funny. Like it would be one of the most comical ways to go out. Because like Odin didn't think that he would live. He went in like, yeah, I guess I'm just gonna step into this boiling oil and let's see how this goes, right? And he just kind of willed it, but like he didn't say this won't kill me. He's like, nah, I'm gonna die, guys. Like this is it. Don't I'm not surviving this one. But Big Mom's like, nah, magma ain't got shit on me. And I'm like, yeah, she's living. As far as with the Kaido thing, like I do feel like
She's living.
I do, I do feel like you're right as far as like you could conclude his story. If this was like a modern anime like a JJK where yeah, he's dead, he's gone, bye bye, right? But like with One Piece, I do feel like given how Oda treated the past antagonist and how much love as far as Kaido's character goes with the setup of Wano and everything, I feel like he's a character that comes back like a Frieza in Dragon Ball where he's just like he shows up and he
Cyborg.
well, like at the minimum, right? It's like Momo is a dragon and he's a dragon, and we got twin dragons. Like Jaya was two dragons together kissing, essentially. Like if you look at the skull, the mouth, it's two dragons and their mouth are together. I'm not saying that's what Momo and Kaido and Adam did. That's a weird story, but they can do a Boro breath together, and then Kaido's just like, oh, you are Odin's son, as opposed to like when he first grabbed Momo, he's like, you're Odin's son, you wimpy loser kid. You know, like Oda is the type to bank on that kind of conversation rather than just cutting it off, I feel like. And so that's there's that. And then I also do feel like that given how Kaido started off as a character where he was like lost in his goals, and we don't necessarily see like Oda kind of skipped the parts of what developed Kaido into the exact character he was where we got him. And I could see it where, we see that Kaido and King parallel Luffy and King. Or Luffy and Zoro, sorry. And so like what if Zoro was that loyal and reliant on a flawed Luffy, or Luffy that failed at Marineford, a Luffy that didn't come out of Skypiea and Thriller Bark the same person, right? A Luffy that ended up more like Moria, where Moria was defeated and lost everyone and ended up turning into this like deformed version of him. And I could see that like Kaido ends up being like a like not a foil, but like a way that Oda very strongly creates not a redemption either, but just like an understanding of how he ended up the way he was. Like, is he bad timeline Kaido, good timeline Kaido? No, he's something in between, but like now he fully understands it because he sees Luffy. And I feel like that might be a powerful thing for him to get at, because he didn't really he at the end he accepted Luffy as Joyboy, but he didn't really understand why he was Joyboy, because he kept on saying like, you're not Joyboy, you couldn't possibly, why are you supporting these loser samurai, right? Like, and I don't think he fully understands that part of it. He recognizes like the man who's gonna defeat me is Joyboy, but why, right? And I feel like Oda's gonna play on that part of like having Kaido experience the why. Similar to what would be the value of bringing back like a Crocodile and a Doflamingo and all these characters. It's like they end up working with
Yeah.
Luffy in some capacity, so it is something like
Yeah.
that. Um,
Another video that I have that's, I know we need to get back to questions. I just want to throw this in real fast. Is parallels potentially between Kaido and Fisher Tiger, where Fisher Tiger would basically die before he became the thing that he feared, or the person that he didn't want to become. Kaido went through the same story arc of becoming a person that he didn't want to be, but instead he could not die, and effectively
oh,
lived out that future. That's another good one.
I like that. And Kaido's technically a fish. He got the fish fruit.
Yeah, well, he's also an Oni, which is a unique race, which he
True.
specifically, is alluded to as discriminated against in similar ways to Fishmen,
Yeah.
right? Like to conversations with Yamato of you can't trust humans.
Huh, that would be really interesting if, because like you were saying, Fisher Tiger kind of allowed himself to die too because he didn't want the help of the people he hated, whereas Kaido got the help. Like the CP0 was working with them like across the board. And Doflamingo was a celestial dragon and he hated the world government and he ended up working with him too. So it's like there's a lot of things that Kaido ended up doing that like young Kaido, that Kaido that was screaming at the king, he'd be like, "Yo, what are you doing, bro? Why are you being the exact same thing as what you hated?" And huh,
The
that's a
world
very
changed him.
interesting.
Just like Fisher Tiger, he saw too much,
Yeah.
and he tried to keep it at bay for a time, and eventually it changed him because he didn't die.
Well, 3 day link the video. Awesome. I thought that you were saying that that's a video that didn't come out yet, but damn, this is how Joyboy is debuting. That he's the opposite. He's the good timeline ParVision, where he gets all of his videos out as opposed to me. Um, the okay, so the next super chat, Mr. Bushido with the €5 says, "Do you think it's significant that Carrot is constantly getting associated with the number 8? What's that about?" So wait, real quick, Joyboy, do you know who Mr. Bushido is?
Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Bushido comments on my videos as well. He always leaves a super chat on
Uh,
the video
about Carrot.
or whatever he's talking about that's related to the video. Has so many theories.
Really?
It's
He does.
incredible.
Wow, he's a much better viewer on your channel. But so for me, what he always does, no matter what I'm talking about, literally in the last few videos he commented, and it's always about Carrot, always about pushing the Carrot agenda on my channel. So that's why I want to see if he did it on your channel too. But so since this is a new experience for you and not one for me, do you think it's significant that Carrot is constantly getting associated with the number 8, Joy Boy?
I don't know how Carrot is associated with the number 8,
All
so
right.
I can't comment on that.
Yeah, Mr. Rashid, I also am not fully aware of how she's associated with the number 8. Um let me see if he's in the chat to explain, but I don't really see the comparison. Is she the 8 Duchess of Mokomo Dukedom? Because I don't see that either. Eighth straw, no, not even the 8th straw hat. Um I'll let you cook with that, Mr. Bushido. But then we got aim DX. Oh my god, you changed how to pronounce the name, and now I'm stuck with the aim PDX. But aim with the 10 gifted memberships. I appreciate you. Um, thank you so much. Shout outs to you for that one. We have Pen Pal 1058. It's an interesting name. With the 280 California, no, not Canadian dollars. There we go. Two goats chatting. Roger and Whitebeard vibes. W. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Except we just got past the part where Joyboy. No, actually no. It's the same thing where it's like Whitebeard didn't really do much with the Pirate King thing, whereas Roger did the whole King Caboodle. And Joyboy's out here probably he's sitting on the video that explains what the ending of One Piece is. He just doesn't want to rush Oda. You know. He doesn't want Oda have to change the
Bro,
story.
I am not a hero. I do not share my meat.
Whoa, ayo, pause. Oh my god. But yeah, I appreciate you, Pen Pal. What is 1058 significant because you like chapter 1058, or is there a different meaning? Because I don't know. 1058. I feel like when I look at any of these numbers now, the chapter comes to my mind. Even when I'm looking at like elsewhere, if anything like 1064, I'm like, oh, what chapter was that? Oh my god, that was Sabo's flashback. Oh my god. Oh, no, 1064 is not Sabo's flashback. That's what happened in that? Oh, Shaka tells Dragon that he's gonna die. There we go. See, chapters just come to my mind.
You're right.
Zamd Al with a $10 super chat says, "My goats, 2 questions. What do you think about them absorbing all the OG warlords and their Utopia project?" So the Zam, are you in the chat to explain the Utopia project, because that's new for me, but the OG warlords are you're saying that you think that the world government's going to absorb the OG warlords again? And because I think that's what the Seraphim part is for. But adding to second question, it says, what do you think the Gorosei called Emu the creator of the world? That's too specific. Or, oh no, why do you think the Gorosei called Emu the creator of the world? That's too specific. All right, so then let's start on the first question. Or actually, let's start with the second question and see if Zam answers the thing. Oh, Alabasta was the Utopia project by Crocodile, right? Oh, Crocodile did say that. You're right. But that wasn't necessarily the world government, right? That was like Crocodile on his own.
I feel like the question is an extension of my Blackbeard theory, where I also speculate, in addition to the world government making allies with Blackbeard, I speculate that they may take the Cross Guild as allies, and certainly the concept is interesting because
He was
they're
talking about
taking
Cross Guild, by
bounties
the
on
way.
Marines now. Yeah, so basically, it sounds like a world government and Cross Guild alliance, like reabsorb Cross Guild
Yeah.
plus plus Crocodile's plan in that.
Yeah. That's interesting then. I mean, that would be the way Buggy could become, takes the seat of Emu, right? Like if he joins the world government. And then he's just like, huh, what is this seat up here? And then he just goes, sits there, and then everyone's jaw drops. And then Buggy could have a casual conversation with Emu too. That would fall into a lot of the theory realm of like, you know.
No.
Wait, you're not. This is
it.
where Joyboy theories draws the line. Wait,
Yeah,
where are
we're
you
not doing
opposed
it.
to this? Buggy sitting on the
Erase it.
throne?
No, Emu as a clown.
You're that's right. Okay. So if Emu gets revealed and they have a clown nose, and then you're like, nope. If Buggy's from the Nerona family somehow. Nope, you don't want that.
No, we're not doing that. No, I'm a hater officially.
Would you? Would you? Is that okay? We get to the year not year 3000, but we get to chapter 1296, and it's revealed that Emu has a clown nose. Do you drop One Piece? Is that something? If Buggy is like related, Emu's just Buggy's brother. Is that like? Are you not putting out a chapter review that week?
No. It's just like some things need to be said after that. I feel like like staying on One Piece's reputation. Like Oda's gone downhill. Yeah.
It's washed up. But it is. I as much as the memes are there, I have several videos where I'm like, I put Buggy in the same conversation as Rocks for like narrative and sentiment, like Cross Guilds to the Rocks Pirates. There's so many parallels, whatever. And then there's another video where I'm like, oh, maybe Buggy's part fisherman. That's where the nose comes from. That's why he's such a good swimmer. That's why even though he ate a devil fruit, he still came out of the water and swam to the top out of some random thing in a chapter where Oda called it devil fruit. Oda depicted the devil fruit that way. And then I also said in a separate video, and I connected the two later, saying that it might be that the Celestial Dragons had a primarily, or Emu specifically was like an X, like not X, but like a a dissenting race of Fishman Island, where when we look at Fishman Island, they have a very weird hierarchy where it's a common ground, and then just above them is where the royal palace is, and the royal palace is a dragon, and so it's their kingdom is called the Imperial Dragons, and then you just go up to the Celestial Dragons, so it's Imperial Dragons and then Celestial Dragons. So it makes you think like, wait, if dragons if Kaido's fruit says that dragons are fish, then where are the dragon fishmen? And then you're like, wait, if the regular fishmen are here and then the Imperial Dragons are here and then the Celestial Dragons are above, maybe Emu's a fishman.
You are cooking way too hard for the end of this video. I swear. Yeah, there's something here. I'm sure of it.
Yeah,
the Ryugu House literally has a dragon statue around it. That's related to the lore of that's what Ryugu is in the first place.
Yep.
The dragons existed at some point in the world of One Piece. They had to, in my opinion.
Yes.
I think that they were literal gods. Like whether that's however you want to view that, they were seen as gods. So where are they? How did that story play out? I
S-
mean, yeah, I
So
agree with you.
so you know, I'm not some of my videos are actually released, not all of them are in the back burner. So I have a video on this concept, fleshing all this out, Buggy being a fishman, but then also celestial dragons being fishmen, but the dragon explanation about where they went and why they don't exist. I was saying like, wait, what, wouldn't dragons just be fish for clouds, because they had cloud fish and some of them look like kind of dragon like, and I was like, what if the dragons were just this fish in the sky and we don't have those
I
clouds
mean, they have
anymore?
the white sea and the
Yeah,
white sea. I
exactly.
mean,
That's what I'm saying. And so then that
why
leads
not?
to my Void Sentry video, where I was saying when you take Void Sentry, so Kohaku no Haku Nen, that's the kanji, and Oda also put the katakana, but when you take the kanji for Void is white sky. So you could break up the kanji and it says white sky sentry. And so my video is essentially saying that that means that maybe the Void Century was a world where the entire sky was white, creating not an eclipse, but blocking out all the sun, making different realms, which is what they call the underworld, and you know, the underworld being where we are now. But then the white sky left somehow. But that also, earlier I mentioned the Ice Age, that all connects to that Ice Age thing, which is that whole, you know, mega theory. Um, but that all leading to the, I never said it, but a lot of people in the comments are like, are you saying Buggy is gonna sit on the throne? Are you saying, I'm like, you know, you don't put words in my theory, but I'm not opposed to my theory putting those words in your mouth, because Buggy sitting on the throne would be kind of funny. And the nose, hey, listen, that would, Joyboy, tell me at least, that feels a little bit like Oda writing, right? A little bit. It's a little goofy.
Look,
It's a little
look,
fun. It's a, you know,
look,
it's Oda's writing. Yeah.
look, look, look. Here's reality, right? Buggy has become a literal fucking Yonko. Sorry. Uh,
Yeah, one more
is
thing.
Oda Oda gonna take it all the way to the end? Why wouldn't he? Is how I feel about that. Way to the end. Buggy, king of the world, even if it's for a moment. Why not?
Hey, Buggy, Luffy, and Blackbeard all broke out of hell together. Why not? Why not break out the, you know, out of Emu's hell together, right? Right? Impel down, and then they came out together. Well, technically, Blackbeard broke in when they broke out. So like, huh? That's actually kind of
Here.
symbolic. Maybe, huh? Blackbeard broke in when they broke out. Hmm. And then he kind of commented. Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna let that cook for off stream. Um, um,
Bro, welcome to ParVision.
yeah, that one's that's a video right there. Whoo. Um, okay, but actually, the second question here, and then we'll do two more after that. Uh, why do you think Gorsei called Emu the creator of the world? And that is actually kind of, you know, as far as everything that you talked about, the past, like that specific line is very interesting. So you know, I have various versions of my ideas. That's actually a video that's coming out later on, as to why I think that Emu could be that. I had a past video where it's like Emu, and I think you watched it too, where it's like Emu is the Earth and is the Cloboterman of the Earth, and so they can control the entire thing, like that, and that would be symbolically why they're like this planet versus the moons or whatever. But where are you at with that? The creator of the world.
Yeah. Well, I think it works in a lot of different ways. Like first off, I think Emu designed the world government as it is today. So the world has been created by Emu. I think that ultimately he's responsible for, Nefertari Lily defecting, whatever decisions were made that she didn't agree with, and specifically designing the world government as we see it. But even further than that, I believe that Luffy is the sun, Blackbeard is the moon, and Emu is the earth. Whether this is actually true, like they are themselves an ancient being, or that is related to their devil fruit, for instance, being the devil of the sea then being related to this devil fruit, which represents and is itself mother, the sea, right? the
Mm-hmm.
the the earth itself. I think that's likely. Incredibly, like it also relates to the video that I just made as well. But yeah, so then in that sense, being the representation of the earth and is very similar to being its creator. I think that that title would be fitting given that context.
Yeah. It the only part that I'm like with the Earth side, and again, I'm sure we're gonna get the nuance of it, but the more we're getting of Saint Saturn and the Gorosei in general, the more confused I am, at least on this front, where it's like their titles, like Saint V Nasujuro. His name is not Venus. His name is built in to like a last name and a middle initial, and the structure of their planetary names is not standard. And I'm like, this doesn't feel like a title anymore, because then you have to name him V Nasujuro, and then the next guy, if his name doesn't have V, if his last name isn't Nus, or if there was a last guy, like how does it fit? Like why was it so convenient? And like the names are so weird. And now we look at their powers, and like sure, we can create some contrived way to relate the Gyuki and the Itsumare and whatever to their planets, but at the end of the day, it's still like for Oda to canonically explain it within the story, we would need, like, I feel like you would need a chapter that would end up feeling like a theory video to connect the dots of like, yeah, this boar is Mars. Yeah, this boar definitely, or no, not the Itsumade is Mars, like whatever it is, like,
You know,
it would feel like a theory video at that point for Oda to explain it outright.
I honestly think that a lot of this is going to be kept secret. So he's going to reveal like critical points, like moments that we might be able to fill in the gaps. But Oda's done this throughout the story. Is like not everything is explained
Yeah, yeah.
directly in a, yeah.
But I feel like this is a moment where it's like for example, when Doflamingo gave up his, like he had the suites, right? Like his, not the suite commanders, but like he had the card suits, not suites, yeah, card suits, like the clubs, the spades, the diamond, whatever, and then he had he's the Joker. And it's like, that's like, we can understand that, right? Like we don't really need full explanation. And we go to Kaido's and it's like, oh, the calamities, like this is stuff, right? But now we're at a place where it's like the Gorosei, like they fit in a bucket, but like what does that bucket even mean? And I feel like it's kind of weird given that like prior to now, yeah, Oda didn't explicitly say like, oh yeah, Doflamingo's like are all these cards. Like, yeah, maybe he said in the SBS, but like I feel like even in the SBS, it would take like multiple SBSs for Oda to connect the dots for what he has. And I feel like it's not disconnected. I feel like there was logic to his thing. It's just very intricate down to their powers. But then now we're getting their powers and we don't understand their powers either. And at the end of the day, some of it's magic, if not most of it. And that something that we need to, that part does need to be explained, the magic stuff, in my opinion. But yeah, it is really interesting because now the more we get of the Gorosei, the more I want to apply to Imu. But then we also get the characterization of Imu being like this very like brash thinking kind of character, like, oh yeah, closest thing, let's blow it up, cool. And the Gora say like, oh yeah, you know what, that makes sense because they defected, they're revolutionary, they'll send a message, all stuff. None of that was in Imu's mouth. Imu was just like, yeah, it's close, I can see it from my balcony, like cool. And the Gorosei are the ones putting the logic, so it almost feels like that what we're learning about the Gorosei may not even apply to Imu. But some people are like going the route of like, oh, the powers that the Gorosei have are given by Imu, and then there's that. But then we also don't know if Imu's a boy or a girl. There's that discourse, and then we don't know if Imu's a kid or an adult, and there's that discourse, and we don't know if Imu's original. Like we don't know, and it's so wild where we're at with Imu, given 1,100 chapters.
Not knowing how to identify Imu makes making videos really awkward because I can never remember. I always go like Imu, he, and then we're like, oh no, I need to re-record. No, they, and then I screw it up every single time. It is awful. By the way, all of this relates to the video I literally just uploaded like just before the stream. Like,
I saw the thumbnail and I was like,
oh,
this is a great way to close out the stream on this topic. I didn't watch the video obviously because we've been streamed, but I did see the thumbnail, and yo, you're cooking with all these thumbnails. All your thumbnails are things I would like to click on. I will say that.
I've learned a lot. That's a whole game in and of itself. Like my artist name is Azazel. If you guys want to check him out, and link in the description of any of my videos, you can check out his Twitter. Commission him, feel free. He is incredible, and the art that he makes is great. And I think it's like a beautiful marriage of you know, I have lots of ideas. I can send him those ideas, and then he makes them into reality.
Yeah, Shout outs to Azazel. Azazel. Is that it?
I say Azazel. I have no
Azazel.
idea.
Okay. Shout outs to you if you're listening or end up seeing this. Or get, because there's a lot of creators in the chat, small, big, active. Way all of them, I will say, are more active than me. So that's, shout outs to you guys for that. I'm trying to be more like you guys. And speaking of, we have the Last Arcs 3-day trip. One of my mods, 22 months Ultimate Visionary. I appreciate you so much. I have what your super chat is about here, or member chat here, saying Luffy painting the bat, maybe like Looney Tunes Wile E. Coyote using paintbrush to create roads through the red mountain. Maybe Joyboy Nika used it to create the hole through the red line for Fishman Island. And then you put the example in my Discord, which if you guys are in the Discord, join the Discord, because we're going to have a bunch of notifications throughout this break month. But I put it on the screen. You also tweeted it. And just a small aside to this reference, considering your name is Joyboy, imagine a lot of things that Luffy does is makes you laugh and smile. Is the Looney Tunes stuff, does that put a smile on your face when you see the bat and he hits it and he paints it black and he's doing all the goofy stuff? Do you read the chapter and you're happy, or are you like, this isn't my Luffy, this isn't my Gear 5, where's the blood cutthroat Super Saiyan Gear 5? Where are you at, Joyboy?
Yo, so my headphones died, bear in mind, so if you talk
Okay.
over me, everyone will hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like I just watched a Morge video as well. Not to put Morge on blast, but like the concept behind the video was something to the effect of like Luffy hasn't even shown his true strength yet. And his true strength is when he becomes more serious, right? And he crushes Kizaru and has Saturn in the other hand because he's really mad. And it's like, but we've also been told straight up that the more that Luffy laughs, the stronger that he is, or he should be. And that's kind of how I see the story. I think that there's a lot of people that apply things that they like to One Piece that Oda sees as different. And this isn't to say that your opinions and your subjective opinions aren't right. But ultimately, this is a story being created by Oda, and I imagine that he enjoys the story more than everyone else. And it's very clear. I mean, he's like straight up said it in a message, an interview somewhere, of like he intentionally made Luffy Gear 5th so absurd and joyous because of manga's tendency to get more serious over time, and he didn't want that. And there's a lot of beauty in that as well, I think, of just like a story maintaining its identity all the way through. A lot of stories do naturally escalate. It's just what happens when you add all of this extra like danger and tension, threat to the world or whatever, it gets darker. I mean, that's how people normally handle things. And Oda has specifically cultivated Luffy in a way in which he has not changed. He has not needed to change, because the Luffy that started off is the one who's ultimately going to free the world, save the world, in large part because of his ability to laugh. It's central to the story. So when I see Nika, do I always like hysterically laugh? No, I think some jokes are better than others. But I see a lot of people like hate on it as if like this is trash. And yeah, I'm not about that.
Yeah. It's funny because like, when 3-day brings up a reference like this, I just get so much nostalgia. I loved all these things, and I just sit there and imagine like this is. I feel like if like you're an author, if I were to become an author or make some kind of art in the future, I would love to be in a place to put a shine on all the things that inspired me to do this in the way that Oda's doing it. And I can't help but think that like when he's making this, he's like full of love. And then also like sometimes he describes like when he draws people a crying scene, he'll like make the face that he's drawing so he can feel the emotions. He said that about like Usopp in Sierra Village. And I'm like thinking like when he's doing the Gear 5 thing, he's drawing it until he laughs. Like he like when he pancaked pizza toss Saturn and Kizaru, I'm thinking he's laughing. When he did the painting the bat black, whether he knows the Mihawk memes or not, I think he was laughing. And it's just so cool to think about that kind of aspect being brought into the world, because the natural reaction, right, when you see Sabo look at these yokai, he's like, what hellish creatures? And he's kind of like, it's like a mix between disgust and like not fear, but like this is dangerous, right? And yet you have a character that always will always break that, like, this is what these guys are accustomed to, their fear, their whatever. And then Luffy's out here just like, nah, dude, like we could be homies, but why are you just being so evil? You know what I mean? Like, why are you killing people? Like, you know what I mean? Like, Luffy's the type of character that he would be friends with Saturn if Saturn weren't out here trying to kill Vegapunk. I think he literally said that. He's like, hey, can we just get off the island? I don't really care about who you are. Right. And then they're just like, no. And he's like, all right, I guess we're enemies now, you know, and I guess I gotta toss you like a pizza. And then he's like, you know, the whole Vegapunk thing, I have a different nuance about, like, what actually happened to Vegapunk. My current stance, I'm reiterating in a bunch of videos, that I don't think that Vegapunk is dead. That's a long-standing theory. Um, but yeah, it's kind of funny how the dialogue is at. I just feel like the way Gear 5 is with all these references, it makes it better, not worse. Um, but last super chat we have here is Rage One Piece, €5, said Bluno will save Lucci and Kaku from Egghead agenda. The Door fruit will be the true MVP fruit of this arc. CP9 gang gang. CP9 gang gang is crazy. There's CP0 now. We could say CP0 gang gang, but I guess that's a fun question idea. Do you feel like there's probability for more CP0 members to show up on Egghead to help out Lucci and Kaku?
Sure. I don't have any problem with it. Yeah, it just seems like a great idea to me. I mean, whether Oda uses it or not, you know, who knows?
Yeah.
But the Door fruit, like the various dimension fruits themselves, are absurdly broken, and I want him to use them more. I love them. One of my favorite aspects of the entire series.
Yeah, yeah. The devil fruits, like, yeah, the Door fruit is something that apparently Film Red brought Bluno and Khalifa back in a way that Oda wasn't originally, he wasn't going to bring them back, but then after the movie, then he reintroduced them at the Reverie, which was like, oh, interesting. So maybe he does use them, maybe he doesn't, maybe it's a big thing. But like you said, like we talked about at the start, Oda's adaptable. If he gets a good idea and he likes it, he'll run with it and he'll make it beautiful. And in a lot of ways, like you could look at Water 7, you could look at Alabasta. Those are examples of that. I made shorts about it where Oda outright said Lucci wasn't supposed to be the villain. Like, not wasn't supposed to be the villain, but the villain wasn't made beforehand. The only thing that's decided at the end of it was that the Going Merry was going to be set on fire and had the burial scene, and that Frankie was going to join. And he wanted to create confusion along the way, and he introduced a bunch of shipwrights. And then he looked at Lucci, he's like, not even Lucci. He said the pigeon guy. That guy's going to be the villain. And that's it. That's how he did it. And then we got one of the greatest one of people's favorite antagonists in the story being Lucci, not only in such a insane capacity at Water 7, but again, coming back, reintroduced in Egghead. The way he talked to Mars, the way he's talking about Kaku, the way he's acting in Zoro, like a nuance that I don't think a lot of people grasp on reaction was that it seemed like he was alluding to the fact that he was wiretapping the Straw Hats during his entire fight with Zoro, which is why he had the entire plan already known the entire time. Every time Jinbei was talking, Lucci was hearing that because he had the black Denden Mushi and he's pointing to it to Saint Mars. So like that's an example of Oda taking something new, making it a beautiful addition to the story, and it feeling great. And I feel like he could easily do that same thing with the entire CP0. CP9, going back to their cover story, one of my favorite depiction of like a group, because they were just so wholesome. They were all so nice, like in their cover story. They like Kaku became a slide. Jabra became a circus animal, all to get money because they didn't want to commit crimes to fund Lucci's hospital bills because they were now not part of the Navy or Cypher Pole, and they recovered Lucci and then they just went bowling, and then they protected the city too. And I'm like, wow, this is a cool group. So I wouldn't be mad if they came back. And that'd be dope. But yeah, so we got through all the super chats. We got through a lot of discussions. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We had a lot of people here and the mods for helping me out. And again, I apologize for all the technical difficulties, the lag and the stream. It's been 7 months since I did this, and I couldn't have asked for a more favorite guest like Joyboy, who honestly helped me a lot throughout the stream because I explained to him I was coming off of like a night of no sleep because Zenith was just like not sleeping last night. So I apologize for if I wasn't keeping up. But Joyboy, if you guys missed out on some of the details or you came in late, we were talking about a lot of his videos. And again, one of the things that makes Joyboy great is, unlike me, he actually puts out his videos and they're all coming out week on weeks on weeks. And so he just put out a video like the madman he is before the stream. Go check that out. I know 3Day's been linking the channel. And Joyboy, if there's anything that you want to close off with of things to hype up in the future, if you want to say something about the current video that you just posted or just old videos. I know we talked about a lot of videos here and there because a lot of our theories, it feels like a lot of our ideas, when we end up coming together and talk, we like focus on the same points and then we go out and then we're like, oh wow, that's interesting, you thought that, and so then it ends up being a lot of fun. So a lot of cool information. But yeah, Joyboy, let them know what you got going on.
Yeah, I almost ended up talking about this earlier in the stream. Like we jump wildly behind between points sometimes, so it can be
Yeah.
hard to keep up. But there was a thought at one point in time of like talking about the nature of theories themselves, because
Mhm.
we think, I think we do a similar thing, but we think about the story in wildly different ways. And I kind of analyze this stuff. I'm not going to bring it up here, but it's just to talk about, but for sure it leads to like, look, I know 1,000,000% that if I watch a ParVision video or if I come in and I talk to you in person, like your thoughts are going to be different than mine. Not necessarily better or worse. You find evidence and all that stuff, but fundamentally, which is always a cool part about interacting with you, because there are things that I never in any universe would have ever thought about, like Dragon being blind. We didn't even talk about that, but
Oh
it's
yeah.
like, even if it's not true, I mean, you found enough things in the story that is just like, how is this even possible to find in it for it to not have at least some level of truth to it?
Yo, if
But
Dragon shows up with glasses later on, I was saying, like, hey guys, like, there's a video about to be played. Like, let's wait for Dragon to watch that video. I don't know if he can. Maybe he needs glasses, right? So it's just funny that that's the case. But yeah, I see what you're saying.
but yeah, as far as like shout outs, I'm always terrible. I'm terrible at intros and I'm terrible at outros. That's why I do the same thing every single time. But we're making more content, trying to write some, balance my life, etc., and just enjoying being, here, following the journey as I always have.
I like how you say you're terrible at intros, but the one of the first interactions was at the Reverie when you wait, I don't know if it was you or someone was memeing on you, but it was, hey YouTube, it's Joyboy. And I just love that. It's so iconic. Oh man. That was a good one. I think Randy did it to you. Was it Randy?
Troy
Maybe.
Boy theories.
But yeah, so and also you've been coming on to a lot more streams recently too. That's a recent thing, unless I've been like that far disconnected. I feel like every week I saw you on a different stream. So this
Yeah, no, it depends over time. When I first started my YouTube channel, I actually streamed regularly, as
oh
far as like just on my channel, like a still background image, I'm reading the chat sort of stuff. It was like, YouTube, One Piece YouTube in 2016 was like a different place entirely.
yeah.
But I did do that a lot in the past. I think the first ever collab stream that I had was with Rogers Base way back in the day, like again 2016 or so. And I'm not opposed to streams because I can't manage all of the things simultaneously. It's like how we're having a stream right now. Anybody who regularly follows me knows when I'm in streams, I don't really interact with the chat much,
Hmm.
and it's just because like I'm just trying to keep up with the conversation.
Yeah.
So I just have difficulties with that. So that's why I don't host streams,
Hmm.
and I'm not particularly good at that. But as far as like attending streams, it's really if people invite me. If you invite me, most of the time I'll come. It kind of depends sometimes. Like right now, I'm in the grind for content,
Yeah.
and other things, so I got to be more selective about it. But like a few months ago, I was like, sure,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah, that's how I roll.
Yeah, a similar thing right now during the break month. I'm on the grind, but then when the chapters come out, I'll be more open again, depending on the chapters. Now, these chapters are like, I feel like just unprecedented levels. Like I can't speak on it because I was anime beforehand. Like I was anime only. Not that I was opposed to the manga or anything. I read other mangas. There's just One Piece was specifically. I was like, it's been a tradition for like 20 years. I get that Dressrosa and Whole Kikan. Those are times when I dipped in the manga, but I just feel like as far as even if I were to think about the anime coming out weekly, like I don't think that there could be a comparison to what we're getting in Egghead prior. And it's so hard to think outside when Oda drops that chapter. It's like, what is everyone thinking? It's so crazy, and that's why I love having these conversations. And hopefully I can keep up the momentum with it. That Oda's taking the break for his health, and shout outs to him because I definitely needed that, and hopefully it'll help a lot of us recalibrate too, because I saw like a few creators like Townsy was also saying like I'm gonna make him a comeback now too. So I love seeing the burst of content that's coming out because of it. And let me see, I think as far as super chats, we cleared them. Intros, outros, what you got going on. We talked about a bunch of videos. Joyboy is Joyboy through and through. His voice is the same cadence, same speech. And we found out it's because he doesn't script his videos. He just talks into the mic, just cuts out the you knows and likes, which is pretty spectacular in my opinion. If I were to do that, oh man, I think it would be longer for me to do that because I'd have to cut out so much of what I'm saying to make a coherent video. I end up writing like 6 videos all at once, and then I cut out like a third of a video, and it ends up being a separate video, which is the case of this video. The Jimmy Neutron video ended up being 30 minutes when it was supposed to be a 10-minute video, and now there's 3 videos off of that video, and I'm like, why did Jimmy Neutron do this to me? And so we're here now, guys. Hopefully we get that out today. And I know it's a meme. The Beatles Part 2 video is coming out. It's coming out this month. If I come out of this break month without at least the Part 2, because remember the Part 3 is supposed to be my What the One Piece Is video. If the Part 2 doesn't come out in this break month, just I don't even know what to say. Just cancel me. No, don't cancel me, but like just I don't know. Just mention it in all my streams. Like, hey, where's Beetle Part 2? Where's Beetle Part 2? I mean, you guys are already doing that. But anyways. Thank you, Joyboy, for coming in, breaking the 7-month hiatus for me and talking with all these theories and bouncing all these ideas. Honestly, we touched on like from Void Century to like revs, like on a macro level to micro level, like so many different levels. That's why we didn't get to the Dragon's Blind thing, because I wanted to stay on the macro level. Because right now it's kind of weird with Egghead. We're like on these small details, but each detail is planetary, literally. Like all these details are so massive. Every time the Gorsei does something, every time Vegapunk is going to speak from now on, it's world changing. And so hey, listen, Dragon could be blind, he could be visually impaired, whatever, what have you. I think that there's grounds for it. But even if you don't think that's the case, go check out that first Dragon video, because that's why I think that, like, the revolutionaries being the supportive role, Dragon being so supportive of all these characters, Kuma making a sacrifice, Dragon having some kind of sacrifice, could all make sense. And now, even more so, now that I have a theory, Yonko, if not Pirate King of Joyboy, saying that the Revs might have been one of the linchpins of the Void Century in such a grand way, is kind of spectacular. Because like you said, like like my ideas you wouldn't have thought of. I couldn't wrap myself around that idea until you had spoken to existence on this stream, and you've talked about probably on your channel. So I appreciate you for all that. Thank you for your voice, again, Joyboy, and thank you for everyone to tune in and listening in on the Voice of All Things. I think episode 42. If I'm wrong, one of my viewers tell me that. But yeah, so we'll see you guys soon, and I'm sure you'll see me and Joyboy plenty more on other streams. If not on his channel, my channel, go subscribe to him. Yeah, so appreciate everyone here. Thank you guys again for all the support, and thank you, Joyboy.
Have a wonderful day.